I was born on a rainy day in the south of Scotland. Very south. England, in fact. I was born in a barn. My mother pushed me out, screaming and crying. The first betrayal, I called it. That night, as I lay sleeping, she left. The second betrayal. Now, none of that was true. It was all acting. Welcome to the Pravanya Pillai acting class. Thank you. Oh, you're too kind, really. Too kind, far too kind. Yes, welcome to the acting class. I am Pravanya Pillai. You probably recognize me from stage and screen. I've had a career spanning 60 years, although I myself look 28, so. Alfred Hitchcock once referred to me as in the shot. Perhaps you remember me from my role in Casablanca 3, Casablanca's Revenge. Or maybe you remember me from my TV work. It was fake. It was all fake. Or perhaps you remember me from my brief stint in politics. Richard Nixon did nothing wrong. Anyway, today we are here to act. I'm an acting teacher, and I cherish these moments that we have together because nothing is more sacred than the relationship between an acting teacher and their banker. So just to get a gist, who here has heard of acting? Yes, we heard. You, sir, you've heard of acting. What is your name? Hugh, like the actor Hugh Grant. That's it, but you're not him. No, I could tell. So Hugh, tell me, who is your favorite actor? Wrong answer, it's me. Okay. All right, thank you very much, Hugh. Round of applause for Hugh. Thank you. In acting, we must always do a round of applause because sometimes it's the only payment we get. Right, okay. So for your first lesson, I am going to read aloud from Hamlet. Yeah. And you can take notes because my acting teaching style is very much I act and then you take notes. Everyone, pens and paper, thank you. Or e-notepads if you have them. It's a modern world. Right. Hamlet. To be or not to be? That feels wrong. That's a typo. It should be to do, right? To do or not, to be or not to be. Wow, that is who wrote this? Garbage. Honestly, it must be a new writer. Anyway, well, there's 5 acts, so buckle up. Right. To be.
Sorry. Not to interrupt, but this isn't an acting class.
I'm an actor. I think I know an acting class when I see one.
This is the Triodos annual meeting?
Then why am I here?
I honestly don't know.
This keeps happening. God, fine. Well, I'm here now, so I'll stay here. And I guess if you have any acting questions, I'll be here. I'll answer anything, I suppose, if I have to. And any questions?
Okay.
Not about Richard Nixon, though.
Okay.
We were just friends.
It's a crazy old world, just in case you needed reminding. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I honestly not quite sure what just happened there. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome you all to what is the Triodos Bank UK annual meeting. To those of you here in the Bristol Old Vic, absolutely beautiful venue, built in 1766. I've done my research. Yes, this is the oldest continuously working theatre in the English-speaking world, and it's really a real pleasure to be here. We also have an online audience. Hello to all of you as well. My name is Gillian Burke. I'm a buyer that I've had the pleasure to host the annual meeting for Triodos. I can say now, with some authority, I guess, that it is always special. It's always different, I would say. And it's always inspiring as well, uplifting. So whether you're here in person, whether you're joining us online, thank you and welcome. So we're going to rattle through some housekeeping because we've got a lot to get through. So for those online, we are broadcasting today via a platform called Blue Jeans. If you experience any technical problems, issues, difficulties, then don't talk to me. Message the team and using the moderator chat button, and you will see that on the right-hand side of your screen, and you can sort of talk to the team if there are any issues there. Also, if you are online, you will see a Q&A button that's also on the right-hand side of your screen, and you can post your questions, this is the important bit, when invited to do so. So, also, if you find subtitles useful, you can switch these on via the small cog icon on the bottom right hand of your screen and select closed captions in your settings. So that's the benefit for our online audience. This session will also be recorded, so if you can't stay for the whole thing, then you can catch up later. So I should remind those of you joining in person, we're not expecting a fire alarm today. So if you do hear one, don't panic, just follow the instructions from the ushers. And also if you need any first aid, then try and get the attention of one of the ushers as well. And finally, if you're posting on social media today, we would love you to share your thoughts, your comments, inspiration even, all using the hashtag #AllAboutImpact. So that's the housekeeping over. How's this going to run this afternoon? We've got a lot to get through, like I said. I'll shortly be handing over to Bevis Watts. He's the CEO of Triodos Bank UK for his traditional annual update and how the bank is performing as well. Bevis will then be joined on the stage with some of the senior management team from Triodos Bank. They're going to be here to answer your questions. Now, thank you to those of you who have pre-submitted your questions and answered the call. We're going to prioritize answering those first, but we'll also be taking questions from those of you online as well. And please remember, if you're online and you see a question that someone else has asked that you like, hit the like button. We'll be able to prioritize that. We'll know it's a popular one. And for those of you in the theater, you've sort of lucked out because we're not going to be taking questions from the audience, mainly because just navigating this space with a roving microphone would be a real challenge. But you will have the opportunity to ask questions of the senior management team and Triodos co-workers during the break as well. Speaking of the break, there'll be an opportunity for those of you online to speak to people here, but also those of you online, you'll have to be grabbing your own cup of tea, but we will be streaming a short film to keep you in touch with the proceedings here as well. So more on that later. Right, what next? So, yes, we'll be having the break. When we come back from the break, we'll dive further into our theme today, which is all about impact. And we'll be looking at what that really means in the real world. So to unpack this, I'll be welcoming Triodos Bank Chief Economist Hans Steegman, and we'll hear several brilliant Triodos customers as well, all delivering impact in different areas, in different sectors. Finally, last but by no means least, I'll be joined on stage by businesswoman, activist, and Triodos customer, Mary Portas, who will be sharing her thinking about what needs to change, particularly in the world of business, to create a positive impact, which is, of course, the focus for today. So I'm going to be really, really straight with you. I always feel like a fish out of water in the world of business, the world of finance, even in the context of these events. I've spent my whole working life in what I'm going to broadly call the nature sector. And until recently, I've found it kind of deeply uncomfortable to think that we're going to look to the financial sector, the same sector that has kind of brought us to where we are today, climate crisis, ecological crisis, yeah, and I could go on, that we're going to look to the same sector to fix the problems, you recall the theme today, impact, to fix the problems that really have the impact in our everyday lives, in the natural world, in our workplace, our schools, our hospitals, our relationships. Maybe that's a bit much to ask. But I have to say that really loud inner skeptic, mainly because I've had the benefit of a sneaky preview of what's coming this afternoon, that inner skeptic is quietly intrigued. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Bevis.
Thank you, Gillian. We thought we'd let you enjoy some comedy before I have to talk to you about graphs. So hopefully you enjoyed the beginning. And a very warm welcome to our annual meeting. It's wonderful to be able to do this face-to-face. Again, I've really missed it during the pandemic years, and I hope you all get a great sense of community and meet like-minded people with a shared passion for the bank through the day. But as Gillian said, this is a hybrid event, so hello to everyone who's watching online. There's about 1,000 people involved in today's event through the different channels. We have to do a few things differently being hybrid. So we asked you coming here physically today to submit questions in advance. So when we take some live questions during the Q&A, those will be from the people who are online because they don't have the opportunity to engage with us all in the breaks and so on that you do. So I hope that's okay. A lot can go wrong in a hybrid event, so we'll see how it goes and we'll learn for next year. You managed to submit about 200 questions in advance. So this officially will be our first sleepover annual meeting. You may want to reevaluate who you're sat next to for later on, but the team have done a great job in grouping the questions, and there are clear themes that we'll address later on. And I just want to say it's fabulous to be in this wonderful theatre. Arts and culture is a very important part of what we choose to finance, and that's because we believe we don't think we will address the external crises that we face unless we also undertake an inward journey as people and as how we connect with one another. And the arts can really help us do that in a multitude of ways, and I hope I'll bring that to life a little bit through my presentation in terms of how the arts is already helping express and explore some difficult and challenging issues around finance. So, I mentioned external crises. 2022 was really the year of the poly crisis. I'm sure I don't need to remind you, but we started the year with the Omicron variant of COVID-19, and the awful war in Ukraine started and the economic shockwaves that's created. Then we had the not-so-mini budget last autumn, and then the interest rate shocks to the UK economy thereafter. And all this amidst a time when we continue to see increasing instances of wildfires, drought, flood, and so on. So I don't think there's ever been a more important time for a bank like Triodos to put its head above the parapet and have a strong voice in trying to change the system. Now, that said, we have spent time over the last year looking across the whole European Bank at what our future impact strategy needs to be and which transition themes do we want to really affect. And so later on, I'm delighted you'll hear from our Group Chief Economist, Hans Stegemann, who's going to talk to you about our new impact strategy and those themes. And I'm very grateful to Hans for coming because today is a public holiday in the Netherlands, so he will probably be even more cantankerous and frustrated with the world than he usually is, but you'll hear from him later. Anyway, I hope what I will do is demonstrate we've continued to be a robust bank, even though there's an awful lot to running a bank through these multiple challenges I mentioned, whilst not losing sight of the bigger picture and the fact it is all about impact, and that's what people expect us to deliver. So as we move into an era where the bank will have a new impact strategy, one of the key measures of how successful we are in everything that we do will be how we deliver against our net zero target. And we launched our target to be net zero by 2035 at the latest at the Glasgow COP nearly 18 months ago. And in doing so, we were making some bold messages to the financial sector in saying we are a bank that has never financed fossil fuels, mining, any high-emitting sectors, and yet the earliest we think we could be net zero is by 2035. So all of those making strong claims about it's all fine, we'll be net zero by 2050, when they are probably further behind in the journey than we are in really understanding their baseline and their emissions and so on, need to wake up and really think about what is involved in delivering on those ambitions. And for us, it means we have to support all our borrowing customers in every sector in thinking about how they decarbonise their activities. That may involve us developing new products and incentives for them to do so. We have to be true to what the bank's about. We've always supported pioneers, the new business models, the new technologies that will be an important part of the solution. And then we also have to look for the win-wins. Where can we also deliver greater social equity and inclusion by addressing environmental problems as well? And then our job, I think, is also to provide thought leadership and challenge on policy areas that will help enable all of those things. And so that's what we have really begun work on. And I'm delighted to say our near-term target was validated by the Science Based Target Initiative quite recently. Now, we've published our carbon emissions since 2019, and that's all our Scope 3 emissions, including all the loans and investments that we make. But it's very hard to compare banks and really understand, well, what does that mean in the finance sector? And we're delighted that Mothertree now produce a league table based on the best available data of the carbon intensity of different banks. And so this is per £1,000 you would put into a bank, what is the relative carbon intensity. And it's an odd thing to say, but I'm delighted we're bottom of this league table in a good way, with the lowest carbon intensity by quite some distance. And if that's hard to read, you can look it up online. But that isn't being net zero. It's fantastic that that is our positioning, and that is what we're already delivering. But net zero means we have to grow the amount our projects are sequestering in carbon very significantly. And that has meant seeking to invest more in sustainable forestry, in regenerative agriculture, and in nature-based solutions. And we began that journey over 5 years ago now to think, well, where are the models that we think we can really support? And at last year's annual meeting, we profiled an organisation called Trees for Life, who have recently opened the world's first rewilding centre in Scotland using the bond finance that we raised for them. And we also profiled an important river restoration project in Lancashire that provides natural flood defences. And I'm very pleased that today you will hear from Heal Rewilding, which was our first loan of about £4 million to a rewilding organisation to buy their first site in Somerset. And it's a really interesting example of where we also have to innovate and think as a bank, where do we need to adjust our thinking on how loan terms work and how covenants work in order to achieve the really shared objective and the ambition that we have around rewilding. And then 2 weeks ago, we also announced that we have now lent more than £20 million to Oxygen Conservation to buy 23,000 acres of land for rewilding in Scotland. And throughout this journey of looking, well, what are the models that we can engage with, we've always thought about, well, where do we deliver the greatest public good in terms of public access, in terms of community engagement, in terms of local employment that is generated in rural communities. And Oxygen are a private sector organisation. Their founders actually are solar energy entrepreneurs, but they are entirely aligned to those purposes. This is not an organisation that is profit first. This is conservation, nature restoration first, with the aim of generating a surplus to then fund that work in perpetuity. Obviously, we continue to take a very holistic view of what sustainability means. It also means social inclusion and many other things to us. You'll hear later from Elite Supported Employment Agency, which is one of our customers in Wales, who we're very proud to support and do fantastic social inclusion work there. You'll also hear from Human Forest, who are pioneering affordable micro-mobility solutions, and we've lent them £5 million to really scale their operations. They're initially in London, but you'll hear more about them later on. And we also keep a focus on placemaking. So where can investment in regenerating buildings or communities, where can it improve human quality of life alongside achieving environmental objectives? And Sea Lanes in Brighton, that is a virtual picture, it is under construction, but it will be an open-air swimming facility with lots of small business, micro business units built to a net zero standard, which is regenerating part of the seafront in Brighton. And then here in Bristol, we supported Autonomous Investments with finance to grow their commercial property portfolio, and they are very, very ambitious in terms of decarbonising commercial property and making a very significant contribution to net zero targets. So that's the work we do on financing change, just some highlights. And a reminder that you can go to knowwhereyourmoneygoes.co.uk and see every loan that we make in the UK. But we also continue to work to try and change finance. And we work with all sorts of partnerships and initiatives to try and influence the wider thinking on both what our financial system needs to transition to, how our economic system needs to be evolved to be one that is connected to nature and the natural environment, and also how businesses have to evolve more generally. And so the reason we're delighted Mary Portas is with us later is she really is a great champion of the Better Business Act, which we've supported, and I'll let her tell you about that later. But I suppose in my time running the bank, you've seen a real sea change in the number of organisations that now really get it and want to change banking and want to change finance, and we feel much more supported in that. And it was fantastic recently that the Make My Money Matter campaign has extended its focus, which was originally on pensions, to also focus on the banking sector. And I just want to show you a short film which stars Rose Leslie and Kit Harington, who are actually married in real life. They're actors married in real life, with their take on couples therapy.
So, why are you here?
He cares too much about what people think about him, and it's affecting our relationship.
It is in no way affecting our relationship.
It is.
I'm always there for her. I always put her first.
Yeah, see, I want to believe that, but I just don't feel that.
Can you be more specific?
Yeah, I mean... So when was the last time you posted anything about me?
Would that be something you'd be open to doing?
Absolutely not. It's professional suicide. You know I can't do that. You know I have to play the game.
Just say it. You want people to want you.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, you're
Let
obsessed.
him speak.
People have certain expectations of me. I can't just be open about every aspect of my life.
See, this is what he does. Whenever he speaks publicly or posts about anything on social media, he acts as if he's a martyr. I mean, he believes that he's saving the world.
Oh, God.
He is constantly posting about the millions that he's spending on green energy.
See, the green energy thing. I mean, what do you want me to do? Post about the billions I give you every
See,
year?
he will tell everyone that he now loves renewables. Oh, look at me and my pretty little windmills. And then he turns around and tells me that he loves me. Well, which is it?
Obviously, it's you. It's always been you.
There we are, a good illustration, I think, of what I was saying earlier about the ability of the arts to cut through in messaging and illustrate things in a way we can't necessarily do as a bank. And although we can't do all of the things that campaigning organisations can do, we do still try to be a very strong voice for change in the banking and wider financial system. If you've never heard of a report called Banking on Climate Chaos, it's produced by BankTrack. It's in its 14th year, and the most recent report has come out only a few weeks ago. And really, the key thing that I took away from it is in the nearly 8 years since the Paris Accord was signed, the world's biggest 60 banks are still putting more into fossil fuels now than they were before the Paris Accord was signed. It went up for several years, dipped a bit, and it is coming down, but it is still significantly more. So the rates of change is just not sufficient. And it's a challenge for us as a bank because we try to be very participative, and we get involved in sector-wide initiatives that are trying to bring everybody to the table and talk about meaningful commitments and meaningful change. And at the same time, we feel quite conflicted when we're involved in such initiatives and they don't make progress. And so this is an article in Bloomberg only a few weeks ago that quotes our group chief executive, because the Net Zero Banking Alliance, which was the big Mark Carney and UN-led initiative that came out of the Glasgow COP, is nearly 18 months now down the line, and the big US banks are really making no progress in publishing net zero targets and ambitions and reducing their investments in fossil fuels. So where we need to hold these initiatives to account, otherwise we're just putting the Triodos name into them and giving them credibility. Colleagues also, continue to try and influence a lot of other things. I often say, I think we're in the wild west of green finance and sustainable banking at the minute. There are lots of claims made about change in finance. There are lots of gimmicks with people planting a tree for every customer that joins them and things like that. And what we really need is real hard-hitting progress, particularly towards net zero targets. And so we've called for many years for product standards and definitions of what green really means. And at an EU level, we've particularly lobbied hard that that doesn't include nuclear energy. And believe it or not, nuclear energy is included in the definition of what comprises green in the EU taxonomy, which summarises different categories. In our view, it can never be green. It might be low carbon, but it doesn't fulfil the do no harm principle. And we continue to argue for that, and we'll try and influence UK and global standards and product labelling as they emerge. So I hope that gives you an idea of the kind of things we do, just snippets of what we do on change finance. But we only have the platform to do that and be a kind of challenger to the way banking is done if we're a robust bank. And hopefully, I'm sorry I did say there would be graphs, this shows you that in the UK we continue to trade very well, even through extremely challenging circumstances last year. So we had increased profitability and increased return on equity. I should caveat that as interest rates go up, investor expectations on return on equity go up. So you would expect to see us performing higher in a higher interest rate environment. But that wasn't achieved without a lot of thought and a lot of tactical management of the bank. And we actually took the conscious decision amidst a lot of uncertainty to not go for ambitious growth last year. And we did grow moderately, which is fantastic, but it wasn't a year we were really pushing on that while we tried to manage a lot of the uncertainties we were facing. The thing that you may notice on that graph is there is a line that is going down, and that is our loans to funds entrusted ratio. And what that tells you is that 68% of every pound that you put into Triodos is lent out to the kind of projects you will hear about later. But that is a declining trend, and we want to see that going back up. It's happening for a number of reasons. During the pandemic, an awful lot of people, not everyone, but an awful lot of people saved more money because they were spending less. And equally, it is a very difficult world now to lend money well in the current economic sort of paradigm. And with rising interest rates, we also see a lot of people wanting to repay loans and use their reserves to reduce their debt. So, but the message is we are very much open for business and wanting to finance a lot more of the things that you'll hear about later on. I'm also very pleased to say that the group's financial performance was very strong last year, very solid profitability. But what this graph shows you is there's actually a dip in the overall size of the group's balance sheet, and that's driven by our investment management business, which invests in listed equities through certain funds, and the size of those funds contracted as stock markets also devalued amidst the various economic shocks. But the main sort of retail bank continued to perform well. I think it's also fair to say that we're going through quite a transition as a bank at an international level, including developing a new way to trade our depository receipts, which are effectively the shares in the bank. And I know there's around 20 depository receipt holders physically with us here today. And thank you for staying with us on this journey, because what we're really doing is creating Triodos 2.0. We are trying to create the way the bank is going to be capitalised and will go forward for decades to come and give it the right platform. And speaking of evolving the bank, we continue to evolve the product range and our services to our customers. There were lots of new functionalities launched last year in our app, and lots of new protections for customers as well. But ultimately, we're trying to respond to increasing customer expectations around digital services, increasing regulatory requirements on the products we offer, and also the ever-increasing threats of fraud and cyber security, which really is something of an arms race. So it's very hard for us to be everything everywhere all at once. And we've had to make some difficult decisions on pausing certain product lines or making others available in a selective way whilst we invest in the products that we want to move forward short term. We also continue to develop the organisation. Triodos UK is now around 300 people, which will amaze some of you that have been with us a long time. This is the management team. Despite how they look, they don't bite. They are all here today, so please feel free to ask them difficult questions and then tell me how they do in the answers later on. And many of our colleagues and co-workers are here because we very much want to engage with those who are physically here. But this is by far the strongest team I've had in the 7 years I've been running the bank, and I think they've done a fantastic job with all our colleagues in navigating the bank through some very challenging economic circumstances. And I'm pleased to say that we continue to be well regarded and receive sort of very positive validation of what we do as a bank and how we continue to steer it. We still top ethical consumer and Which ratings for sustainable finance products, and we've won various awards again in the last year, the most meaningful of which are those that are voted for by our customers. So we won 2 awards at the Best British Bank Awards, and they're voted for by customers. So they by far and away mean the most to us. And we also recertified as a B Corp in the last year. We were one of the original B Corps back in 2015, and we've recertified. Our score is 131 versus a global average of 93.9, which will give you a sense of, I hope we are a mold-breaking bank, but also a mold-breaking business in the way we run our business and what we try to be. So hopefully we have a platform to go forward and deliver even greater impact in the future, and to continue to build and grow the bank irrespective of the circumstances that we find ourselves in. But we can only do that because of the platform that our customers give us. So thank you to everyone who's watching online and everyone here today who is a customer. We're very fortunate that we also have some high-profile customers, and Chris Packham is one of those, and completely for free he did a campaign for us earlier this year. You can also be advocates for the bank as well. We have a Refer a Friend scheme, which we will donate money on your behalf to Friends of the Earth, the RSPB, or the Soil Association for customers opening accounts with us through your introduction. So please think about that. In the room physically, I wonder if you could just put your hand up if you are a Triodos customer. If you could just look around you and see anyone without the hand up, and then perhaps suggest that they might help raise money for those charities after, then that would be great. So, and then to finish, I just want to again emphasize the power of the creative industries really in cutting through and articulating difficult messages and engaging more people. And we are very pleased to have collaborated with WWF UK, the RSPB, the National Trust, and Silverback Films on 4 spin-off films they've made from the Wild Isles series, which I'm sure many of you have seen. There is one on finance, there is one on changing business in general, there's one on food and agriculture, and there is one on the marine industries. And I'd really encourage you to watch those films, but also share them as widely as you can, arrange screenings in the organisations you work for, because I think they do a fantastic job of really connecting both hearts and minds around some of the issues that we have to address. So I'm going to leave you just with a very short trailer to whet your appetite for those films. Thank you very much.
If we woke up tomorrow morning and there was no nature, what would that actually mean?
At a certain point, there'll be too much risk in the system.
Nature is providing a wide range of essential services, and it's doing it for nothing.
In a nature-depleted country, simply put, we wouldn't be able to operate as a business.
Unless we see ourselves as inherently part of nature and connected to it, the environmental crises that affect us will only get worse.
This is one of the biggest opportunities that we're sitting on this century.
We need hands on deck. Whole of government, whole of society, whole of sectors together.
Human beings are amazing. When we put our mind to something, we can fix it. So I'm not worried that we can't sort these issues. I'm worried that we won't do it in time.
Wow, well that sets the tone. Thanks so much, Bevis, for your opening speech. As you can see, we're now joined by some of the senior management team. I've got Judy Rose, Chief Operations Officer, Zoe Sear, who is Director of Communications and Marketing, and Roger Hatton, Director of Retail Banking. And this is the opportunity to have a lot of those questions that you sent in advance answered by the senior management team. This is also your moment if you're online. You can start posting your questions now using that Q&A button, right-hand side of your screen, just to remind you. We won't be taking live questions, I've said that before, but you will have a chance to catch up with the team, with some of the co-workers during the break, during the interval. So let's just start with the first questions. Let's get into it, as they say. We've had a question sent in by Luke, who asks, as Triodos grows, there will inevitably be sustainability challenges. How will growth be managed in order to mitigate the environmental impacts of an expanding business? Which is a very good question. Judy.
It's an excellent question. So Bev has talked earlier already about our net zero ambition, and obviously we also wish to grow the business. So sustainability needs to be very much ingrained in everything that we do, part of our DNA. As an organisation, we don't have a dedicated sustainability department or ESG department, but we have a fantastic crew of very engaged and enthusiastic co-workers who really bring the environmental sustainability agenda to life through a programme of activities and events and awareness raising and so on. So I think we're very fortunate with that. In terms of how we run our business, our officers have excellent sustainability criteria. So we are fully renewable energy supplied, and we really think hard about the materials that we're putting into our offices. So the fixtures, the fittings, the furniture, everything is really carefully considered. Obviously, we've all been working a lot more hybrid. This is a great example of that, and that's really cut down a lot of our travel and our sort of paper usage as well. So we're really pleased with that sort of silver lining, if you like, to what's been going on. We have really strict procurement practices, and sustainability is really high up there when we're choosing who we want to work with. So I think there's a lot going on that we're doing. We've also, a lot of you will know that we're already trying to get rid of, that's a terrible thing to say, demise our use of plastic through the DigiPass that we've been using for internet banking. And so we're very pleased with the way that's going. And also our credit card, our debit card rather, has got fantastic sustainability credentials as well. But that's, I think, in many ways, that's only a part of what we're doing. It's a relatively small part. There's a lot in our annual report on this. But Bevis, did you want to?
I mean, the question was effectively as we grow, and that's one of the big issues with net zero, is the easiest thing is not to grow and to stay the size we are and deal with the emissions in the portfolio we currently finance. So Hans Stegemann, who you'll hear from later, talks a lot about degrowth and that debate as to whether growth is the right focus. But we do intend to grow as a bank. We want to be a bigger part of the debate, but that means some challenges with it. And we may make conscious choices to invest in some areas that have higher carbon emissions to help them change. So in the Netherlands, our colleagues are debating investing in households that have very poor energy efficiency ratings and of generally low-income households in order to help them in this transition. So growth is one debate, but how you also engage with the right balance of inclusion as well is another.
Right, so it sounds like it's, feeling your way into the future a little bit in terms of how that's going to look, but you feel confident that you've got a plan.
I mean, nobody has the answers, and that's what we try to say in our net zero target. Nobody has the answers, but those are the kind of issues you have to be mindful of in exploring them. This isn't a simple tick box of a bit of renewable energy and so on.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next question from Martin. This is one about online banking, and it's a really hot topic. Lots of pre-submitted questions. Can't think why. The question is, how are you working to make online banking more user-friendly? I think I'm going to ask Roger this.
Let's start with me. Thank you. Thanks for the question. Clearly, I mean, I think Triodos has been now online banking for something over 15 years, so it's nothing new to Triodos. And there are two key ways in which that is done. One through what we might call traditional browser or PC access, and then increasingly through mobile devices and being able to do that on the move. And well over 85% of our customers use one or both of those forms, and clearly the mobile banking is the fastest growing of all of those areas. Now, those of you that have been Triodos customers for a while will have been through the fact that we're re-platforming our online PC-based, web-based system for a little while, and we have been moving between what we've imaginatively called old and new internet banking. And that's a process which is ongoing, and there's a significant amount of investment that will continue through the remainder of this year to mean that the majority of the functionality is moved across, and you won't have, those of you who know it well, the back to old internet banking button quite so visible on your system. So that's what we're doing perhaps on the web side of things, and perhaps Zoe, you might want to touch a little bit on the app-based side.
Thanks, Roger. So the app, I mean, Roger talked about 85% of our customers using the app or online banking. I think for customers not currently using the app, I'd really encourage them to take a fresh look. It really is the simplest and actually the safest way of banking with us. We've delivered a whole number of improvements and we're constantly updating it, but a lot of our investment, I guess, is quite different to kind of some of the fintech banks, in that our investment is in making it easier to apply for products. We've now, since we bought all of our servicing of investments in-house, you can see the full range of products in the app now, and you can actually see the impact of your money. So in both for savings and investments, we provide personalised impact stats, which is, again, quite different to what other banks are doing, but we're very interested in using the app to help show you the impact you're having, whether that's renewable energy produced or organic meals that have been delivered. So it's one of the areas that we're definitely working on. And I would say, despite the major challenges of running a bank and delivering impact and growing, our annual number of complaints is actually relatively low, but we do see a fair number relating to digital and how to get more digitally active with us. So I think my final point would be, if you're finding this tricky or it's not something you've done before, definitely reach out to the contact team for help. Or we've partnered with a bespoke charity called Citizens Online. I think we've got Jackie from Citizens Online here with us today in Coopers Hall, but definitely the support is there. So definitely reach out in terms of how you can find out more. Okay, thank you for that. Thanks both. I'm going to take the heat off them a bit. I'm going to direct the next question to Judy. This one is from Anne, and I sense a real frustration actually in this one. Why are you making it impossible to open an account without a smartphone?
Yeah. It's another great question, and I think it flows a little bit from the stuff that Zoe's just been talking about, and Roger will talk in a moment. I think he's had some thoughts as well about where it is actually possible, but we'll come on to that. I think it's really important, as an ethical bank, we take the security of our customers' money super seriously. And obviously we've got a lot of regulatory compliance obligations that we need to fulfill as well. And a key part of that is making sure that the people who open an account with us are who we think they are. So in our sort of parlance, that's anti-impersonation measures. And so when we apply for an account through the app, one of the things that we ask people to do is to take a picture of a photo ID and do a little selfie movie of themselves and upload that. And the technology that sits behind that app is verifying that this person who says they're applying for an account with Triodos really is the person they say they are. And it's just such a massively important thing in terms of the security of our customers' money, that we know who's banking with us, essentially.
And in counter-terrorism and money laundering.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And it's not just us, obviously, that is doing this. I think this is becoming more and more common. But as an online bank, we have less options. We don't have a high street presence. And I think, Roger, you've got some probably data on what our customers are actually saying to us about this, right?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is this is definitely the fastest growing area of usage. And I think the key part of this is like any transition of technology. We did it from paper to telephone to online, and now I think moving on to banking is to help and support customers through that process, and we're obviously committed to do that. And I think that part of that is about making continual investment in what in parlance is called the user experience or the customer experience as part of that. And that's what there's a team of people working on all the time to try and make sure that that is as easy as possible and recognises what it feels like in real life to use the tools. So we know that that's a continuous improvement process, and we'll need to work on that. And just, I think one other sort of important point around accessibility, where there is a genuine reason because somebody needs an accessibility support, we will clearly keep channels open for them to continue to use our services, as you'd expect.
Okay, so that's really important. I mean, I think the rate of change across the board, not just in this issue as well, with technology is so fast. It is, yeah, I guess it's difficult for us as customers to keep up with, but I guess for the banks as well, for yourselves. We're going to try and take some online questions now. This one is from Reinhard, and it says, are you a living wage employer, and are you making sure that you only lend money to businesses which are also living wage employer?
Bevis just did that to me.
Did he? Right. Should I just select someone at random?
Well, I'll keep my answer really short. Yes, we are. So we are signed up to the Real Living Wage Foundation, and that's been the case for years and years and years, as long as I can remember.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a great question. And in terms of our lending customers, I mean, I suspect this has come from somebody that's asked us to do this. And it's very hard to impose that blanket across everybody we lend to, because there are some small charities we support and food banks, homeless shelters and so on, who don't quite have the means to be a real living wage employer. But it is part of the conversation. That's why I want to reassure you. And then we're looking around what sits around that and holistically how those organisations interact and support their employees. There will be some sectors we lend to where absolutely you wouldn't expect anything else.
Okay. Okay, well, I hope that answers the question, Reinhard. Do we have any more? Yes, we do. Online questions. Now, this one is from Catherine. Are there any plans to introduce any more funds into the stocks and shares ISA? 3 funds makes for a bit of a limited portfolio, she says.
I think that's coming my way. Thanks, Catherine. It's a great question, and the answer in short is yes. In time, we are looking to do that. There is a series of other funds which Triodos Investment Management across Europe offer, and we put a lot of investment in the context of last year into transferring our platform provider. So we're now managing that ourselves and in-house, and that gives us much more flexibility to add funds into that platform. And so that is really the next step of the journey and the evolution. And there's some really great funds that Triodos Investment Management have more broadly, including things like the Future Generation funds and so on, which invest particularly in things like education and in the Global South and so on, which I think could be a fantastic addition to the portfolio. So it's coming soon, hopefully, to a mobile phone near you.
Okay. Some more pre-submitted questions now. This one from Camilla. I suspect we could talk a long time about this. How is Triodos helping agriculture and farming in moving to carbon-free operations? What projects and initiatives does Triodos support? Bevis?
Yeah, I mean, so the food and agriculture sector has always been a very important part of what we do, and we've always been wedded to organic and biodynamic standards. But even that portfolio is an emitting part of what we do, by and large. We have some who are net sequesters of carbon. In fact, one of our customers did an independent audit and found they were sequestering 10 times more carbon than they were emitting. And so we're trying to share best practice in amongst our community of around 250 organic farms on our books. But equally, it's a very uncertain time for farmers to understand what the future of the subsidy regime regime will be, how might they be incentivized to deliver outcomes for nature alongside food production and so on. So we've been trying to engage with lots of our customers around those sorts of conversations and think, where do we need to perhaps devise new products or lend more money and so on to support them on that journey, and we'll continue to do that. And then the only other thing I'd say is the important thing is also metrics. How do you measure carbon in food and agriculture? And so a number of organisations are working at this, and we talked to several of them. We also sponsored some work with the Sustainable Food Trust to look at metrics and how you could really credibly understand the footprint of different agricultural operations. So there's lots of bits to that answer, but it's something we're very engaged with. Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to just go back to talking about specific products. This question from Louise, but it was asked by several people. It's good to bring this one up, I guess. When might you be able to take on new business accounts? Now, I think, if I remember correctly, last year we discussed this. So I don't know if there's any updates to that.
We did. Well, Roger will provide an update, I think, on this, but I'll start off just by giving a little bit of context, just to remind folk who weren't at the September meeting or didn't watch that back. We do recognise many potential customers are out there who are really super keen for us to offer business and charity accounts again. What happened in the wider world during the times of COVID was that an enormous number of banks actually closed completely for new business. And a lot of that, I think, was, as we understand it, concerning worries about fraud relating to bounce back lending, which then imposed a huge sort of burden on us. We had an unprecedented demand for some of those products, and had to take an extremely difficult decision in December 2021, really very difficult, that we would close accounts to new business at that time and focus our growth around a smaller set of products, but very much still wishing to reopen at some point when we could ensure that that product really met the needs and wishes of our customers, which we felt, incidentally, that the products weren't really doing in any case. So we had a very high demand for a product that wasn't necessarily meeting all of the needs of our customers.
Yeah, the build on that really is to say, until we've managed to prioritise that in our investment portfolio, that's going to be the case, because and that demand and that expectation is rising all the time with the things like integration of accounting software and so on into those products. The slightly good news is that we are still able to offer a small number of accounts, open accounts to existing customers, to our borrowing customers, and to our key strategic partners. So we are still opening a small number of those accounts as we go, but that's likely to be the position. So our focus really clearly is on encouraging our business customers to kind of give us the kind of opportunities to lend to them in the way that creates the kind of sustainable impact that you saw earlier.
Okay. Thank you. So the final pre-submitted question that we're going to take before we go back to the online questions, and this is sort of related to a bigger picture, how Triodos fits in within the wider financial industry, which I alluded to earlier. The question is from Rachel, and it says, are you going to undertake, or are you going to be able to undertake work with the normal commercial banks to help them become greener? Zoe? I'm not sure who wants to.
No, great question. And I think one of the reasons I love working for Triodos is because of how we both finance change through our lending, but then we also exist to try and change finance. It's one of the reasons that we exist as a bank. So a customer that has been with us for a while might remember we were one of the founding banks in 2009 of the Global Alliance for Banking on Values. And that's now grown to include 60 banks globally in 44 countries. So we take seriously that acting as a reference point for how banking can and should be done. And as a build on that, we have been saying for some time that it's really important that banks can measure and disclose their impact on the climate in order to improve it. And that's a key reason why we've helped pioneer new methodology for measuring the CO2 emissions within the lending books of banks. And we've done that in partnership with the Partnership for Carbon Accounting Financials, so PCAF for short. And that's now been adopted by a number of the big banks, including Lloyds, Nationwide and NatWest. And in addition, Bevis talked earlier about some of the different initiatives that exist at a national level, whether that's Bankers for Net Zero or the Net Zero Banking Alliance. So there's a whole host of initiatives and partnerships that with our fairly limited resources, we really try and support. And we're often the really challenging voice in the room, but I think it's great and really important that we are in the room to make those points. Outside of those formal partnerships, there's lots of other ways that we informally engage. I think, Bevis, aren't you even in different training videos talking about sustainable banking for that's been used by NatWest as an example?
Not working, but I am. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
I was going to ask,
and I think
what's it like being in the room?
others have used those materials as well. But I think ultimately it's our ambition as a bank to take others with us on this journey. And the more we can share the tools, the knowledge, the experience that we have, in order to create that fairer, more just financial system, the better, really. So we put a huge amount of energy, or as much as we can, into that work.
And what is the, have you felt any sort of shifts, even little tiny
Well,
ones?
I would definitely say over the last 7 years, which is the time I've been in role and Bevis has been here, we wouldn't even used to get in the room. The national media didn't talk about sustainable banking. It was kind of sustainable what? So we've seen, a massive shift, which I think is hugely positive. Because the fact that we're in the room and can make the case and we're asked to advise on these things is massive progress.
Yeah, and there are some things happening that are very good, and we should call that out as well when we see really good stuff happening. There are good products and good things being done within a number of institutions, but the wider scale of change is nowhere near enough, and there's no correlation between action and what the science is telling us on climate change and biodiversity loss. So we have to kind of have that mix of celebrating where good stuff happens and trying to manage the Wild West I referred to earlier as well.
Yeah, lawless frontiers. Great. So let's see if we do have more online questions. This is a question from Stephen. Do you have any plans to introduce digital payments such as Google Android Pay? Stephen says he uses a third party whose social and ethical credibility is not going to be anything like Triodos's. I don't know who would like to answer that. Is that one for Roger?
Yeah, that sounds.
That's you, Roger.
Yeah, so I was half expecting this one to appear somewhere in the afternoon. Clearly, as a bank that's moving in that digital and committed to a digital delivery direction, then the whole area of mobile payments is clearly something we have to get on board with, and we've been, I think people would recognise, a little bit slow off the mark of that. And part of that is because we have been spending time looking at, well, how do we find ethical partners and so on into that market, and that is something which is on our development schedule, where hopefully we will have some mobile payment use to give you, hopefully at least this time next year. There are some partners, and I think it's referred to in the question, which do provide things like a facility to use Apple Pay with a Triodos card. I think there's one called Curve, for example. And that gives customers the functionality which is very similar to something like Apple Pay. But I'd be clear, we can't actively endorse that because, as the question sort of implies, we haven't been able to do full due diligence on their ethical credentials, for example, or indeed how they're using your data and your data policy. So for those of you that a bit like me feel that they do need an Apple Pay type option or a digital wallet, then those kind of apps are there. But as I say, we would caution you to do your own diligence on them until such time as we've caught up and we've got our own integration for you.
Okay, great. I think we've got one more question. I think time for one more question is what I mean. What is Triodos doing to address diversity and inclusion within the organization? This is from Carmel.
With 28 seconds, as I
Yep.
can see on the clock.
Yep.
That's,
Well, it's still
that's a challenge.
Yeah.
So probably also worth saying that some of us will be, upstairs during the break, so we'll be able to answer this in full. And our Director of HR, I can just see, I think, through the lights, is also here. But we have an EDI strategy, which runs through at the moment until 2025, and we've been doing a huge amount of work to improve things like the gender pay gap, which has decreased, which is a good thing. It's not zero, it's not where we want it to be, but it's reduced year on year, so we're feeling very positive about that. We've done a lot, so beyond gender, we've done a lot on recruitment. Some of you might have already met with Babasa, who are outside, I think, running a stall, who we're working with to provide training in diverse recruitment practices, to work with our managers and so on, to really help us on the journey that we feel is so important for us as part of our mission. And I'm sensing I should probably stop. But he's carrying on.
And it's not a new focus for us. And actually, we've been over-indexing for several years on the number of people we recruit from different ethnic minorities and so on into the bank versus the benchmark for the population of Bristol. But you can visit the homepage of our website, and on the bottom right-hand corner, there's a little click, and you can go straight to our equity, diversity, inclusion sort of strategy statement. So.
Fantastic. I think, Gillian, on it, we've answered it probably quite fully, but I think we feel quite strongly as a senior team that this doesn't all just sit with HR as a responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we have a really active inclusion forum that actually, from a senior team perspective, Roger and I are co-members of that as well. So that's a cross-section of our co-workers who are really active and really engaged and really great at holding us to account and raising issues in a really transparent way. So it's been a really interesting area of work for us to all get much closer to.
Yeah. Sometimes it's good not to be a slave to the clock. It's great, we got that answer. Thank you so much. Please join me in thanking the senior management team, everybody. So before we do go for a break and interval, and I'm going to try and make sure we all land this on time now, be a slave to the clock again. I'd like to welcome the joint CEO and artistic director of this beautiful theatre, Bristol Old Vic. Please welcome Nancy Medina.
Hi. Hi, thank you so much.
It's sort of weird welcoming you to your own theatre, but take a seat, make yourself comfy. Well, it's a pleasure, absolute pleasure. You have only, in earlier this year, picked up the reins of the theatre. How is it going? How's it feeling?
It's going really, really well, and welcome, because this is this is an amazing, beautiful theatre, and I'm so glad that you are all here to join us. It's been going great. I've actually been here since October, but part-time, which has been a really, really wonderful way of sort of joining the organization, rather than sort of jumping into another organization's rhythm. I've been able to have some really great, wonderful conversations and be able to have distance. But I've just been full-time for the last few weeks. And it's been going, I feel really, really lucky. I've been a theater director for about 20 years, and the way I've been approaching this job is very similar to how I am as a theater director in the rehearsal room, which is I encourage all of us to leave our egos at the door and to put our vulnerabilities on the table. So for us, it's been about having important conversations, about providing really good questions, doing really good active listening. What are our values? What is our intention? Why do we want people to walk through these doors and see these stories here? You know, what is our civic duty as a cultural organization? And that's why this slow burn since October has been so fantastic for me, because it's allowed us to have some deep conversations, not just get to the activity, to the work, because we all know what that's like. We all have a huge to-do list. But it's allowed us to have these really integral conversations around what is leadership? What kind of leadership do I want to get myself involved in? And for me, it's on a personal level, as a freelance theater director, I've had my creative mission as an artist, and the stories that were important for me and the audiences that were important for me to reach, and having to put on the hat of this organization, I need to think broader beyond myself and my own pathway. and how I support and encourage other people's. So it's been good. I'm obviously feeling positive about it, but I just started, so I don't know.
No, bring the good energy. I mean, you mentioned stories there, and from my sort of perspective as a biologist, I mean, our species, human beings, it's been said before that we're defined, one of the things that defines us is as storytellers. So everything about the way our world works, the economy, money, religion, football, you name it, kind of hinges on the stories we tell ourselves. So I'm just thinking about the theme for today, which considers impact, and how, I guess, impact, meaning how do we create a just and sustainable and prosperous society, all those good things. How does theatre and the arts fit in that story for you?
Well, we are storytellers, and I think that there is a great responsibility that speaks to the impact of what theatre and TV and film do, which is help us reflect our society back to us. And there's a great responsibility because we are cultivating and shaping and platforming what our societal attitudes are about our world and our society. It's so important that we make sure that the stories we're engaging with are truly relevant, because that's a huge responsibility. To think that in 50 years' time, someone's going to look at what we've been creating now and say, that's what society was like then. Can we truly say that it feels appropriate to what we see on TV at the moment of what our society is, really, what it reflects? So I think it's a huge responsibility, the impact that arts and culture has. I've been talking quite a lot in the sense of, so my family's from the Dominican Republic, and in the Dominican Republic, we have a saying, todos somos cultura, we are all culture. So I have a real problem with cultural organizations saying, oh, well, come through our doors because I'm gonna offer you art and culture. But how can you offer me art and culture when we are all culture? So I think it's part of our responsibility, and the true impact that we will have is to invite everyone to be making that art with us so we can truly reflect what culture is and what our society really looks like.
Is there like a tension between reflecting like art and the stories that you tell here, reflecting society as it is now, and society as it could be? And then who gets to say what that could be looks like?
That is such a great question, because that is also the job of art, is to help us all be innovative and creative enough to imagine the world that we want as well. I think what's important, we've just launched our season last week, which we're all really excited about, the first season of me as artistic director. And there's a really important theme to it, which is belonging. It ties every piece of the work that we're doing. And there are some heavy-duty themes involved around working class versus, upper classes, the state that we're in at the moment, energy crisis, all of these things, queer relationships, how we navigate our sense of belonging in that. I mean, heavy duty themes, but all wrapped up in a really joyous package. And it's important that it's joyous, because I think there's resilience through joy. And I was thinking quite a lot of what we've all experienced, and we've all experienced the pandemic. That is an amazing thing that keeps us all in the same playing field, which we normally aren't in the same playing field. And for me, if I'm inviting you all to come to this theater to watch some stories, I'd like to laugh with you, because we haven't really laughed. It's been really hard. The last 3 years have been hard. The economy has been knocking us, like our prospects for the future has been knocking us, on our butts. And sorry to say it like that.
Yeah.
And for me, it's important that we understand that as an audience, we create a community together, even if it's just for a few hours. And it would be amazing for us to see something that's relevant, that we care about, something that either you're going through personally or somebody's going through personally, but also find the humor, find the laughter, spread that energy. That's been really important about this season.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. Good luck for the season ahead. Really wish you well. Thank you so much. And yeah, just love that energy and that passion. Everybody, please, thank you to Nancy. Good. feeling quite energized after that. But this is the chance to kind of stretch your legs. The senior management, the co-workers, the charities, they're all around here. Please find them and also enjoy the interval, enjoy the break. And we'll see you back here around 3:40. Okay.
If you want to have a better world, you have to look forward. Most financial parties look back. They try to understand if the current investment is sustainable, what the impact at this moment is. And what we try to do is, with a forward-looking lens, understand how the future can be shaped by our investments.
We're always at the front of the next wave of what needs to be financed.
That's the role of Triodos in the financial system, to be a front runner.
It's really about financing change, but also by demonstrating it, changing finance.
That's the only way for us to make a difference in the system. And that's what we want to achieve. We want to change the system.
Triodos Investments actually took the first step and really listened to us and did understand that this is important for the energy transition.
They're not only talking about it, they really want to change something.
There are a whole host of other asset managers moving into sustainability and impact, but there's something about Triodos that makes it unique. We've got investments for positive impact across the whole spectrum, from the listed markets.
Some of these listed companies, they have more revenues than the average country. So they can really influence government policy, drive consumers.
Right through to pure private equity and private debt.
Our footprint was really global.
We invest in over 50 countries and not only monitoring from the distance.
There is more to investments than what is written on the paper. You have to have insight and knowledge on those complexities, and that's why it is really important that we have a diverse international team.
And a whole number of impact pillars as well, focusing on renewable energy, food and ag, financial inclusion. Everything that we do is geared towards positive impact, and that's what makes us different and authentic.
Money can be transformative. It's like energy, it can really put something in motion, but only if you use it consciously.
Triodos has shown over the last 40 years that it's possible.
The misnomer that you have to give up returns to have a positive impact have been disproven. There isn't any excuse any longer. You're either investing for a positive future or against it.
If you have a clear vision, it's not risky to be at the front edge. It's actually very, very good opportunities. That's Triodos.
We know how to get there, and we want you to join us.
Wow. Well, welcome back, everyone. That break obviously energized everyone. That film that you've just watched is a Triodos investment management film. It's from the investment management side of Triodos Bank. And I think that sort of sets the tone for this second part of the afternoon, of the meeting. Now, I'm hosting this event, but I'm with you. I'm a Triodos customer, and I'm probably a Triodos customer for the same reasons that you are. I'm hoping that this action of mine, opening an account with an ethical, sustainable bank, helps in some small way to make a difference in the world, so that we live in a world where people have the tools and the resources to live fulfilling lives. I may be a wildlife presenter, I might be into nature, but I really care about people as well. So I find that really sometimes almost the first thing that needs to be fixed. But obviously a world where the economy operates in harmony with nature as well, where we do no harm, as Bevis mentioned earlier. Clearly, we are not there now. And the question is, how do we get there? And this is the deep dive we're going to do now with this theme about it's all about impact. And I'm joined by a man who's spent a good long while thinking about how to get there. So I'd like to introduce Chief Economist of Triodos Bank, Hans Stegemann. Welcome, Hans.
Thank you.
So I'm going to do that really weird thing, which is I'm going to tell you all about Hans while Hans sits here and listens. So let's see.
I can also tell. I know it also.
Well, I'm hoping I'm going to reflect back a quote, which we'll see how you feel. So first of all, a quick introduction. So Hans, you worked for a trade union, began his life in a trade union in his 20s, not the 20s. From there, he's done really well, hasn't he? From there, moved on to a government agency, was involved in research. By the 2008 financial crisis, worked in the financial sector by this point in Rabobank in the Netherlands. And this is sort of, I think, watching back when I was doing my research about you, I came across a quote that really struck me. You said this. You said, if I really want to understand economics, if I want to understand the world, then it's not all about money. In essence, it's about values.
Good quote.
Yeah? You're pleased with that? Yeah? You stand by that still?
I still agree with that, yeah.
You didn't know, like, did I say that? So this was the move to Triodos, is that right?
Yeah, this was one of the reasons to move to Triodos. So I worked for like 15 years on models, and then you see in the end that what economists do is putting values in equations, I think in the end. And then saying, this is like engineering, they say. This is like physics, but it's completely not. It's about their own values you put in a model and say, oh, this is reality.
And just to clarify, values, not data, but values as in what you care about.
Yeah, you capture the assumptions of economics in a model, and behind those assumptions and that data are the values. And you don't discuss those values anymore, but you say, hey, this is the economy. And that drives to a place where I don't want to go.
Sure. So you didn't start life in the financial world. That was never the intention.
Never the intention.
Interesting.
No.
But having said that, here he is, Chief Investment Strategist at Triodos Investment Management for the past 6 years. And at the end of last year, your role has extended to become chief economist at Triodos, including the investment management side. And all the while, writing a weekly column for the Dutch equivalent of the FT. And I've just learned backstage as well, you also have a podcast.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So in this role, maybe sort of in the context, I guess, we've set the scene. Values is almost the starting point, what you care about. What you believe in. How does that transfer and become impact?
Yeah, that's I think also for today an important question. What is impact? Which seems a very obvious question, but I think a lot of players in the financial industry translate impact to doing less harm. So not even doing good, but doing less harm. And I think what we mean with impact, everything has impact, to put first. So every economic activity has probably, to some extent, negative impact on our ecosystems because it uses material, it uses energy. And what we try to do, and what we try to rephrase is, if you want to achieve positive impact in the end, it has to be holistic, it has to be forward-looking, and it is not that easy to put it in the right place. And so impact is, well, we talk so easy about sustainability and impact, and it's all the same. But in the end, if you really think about what is impact and what is positive impact, you also have to phrase what negative impact is, and in the end, what your end goal is to achieve. You cannot say, we have impact, you have impact for something or on something, and that on something is the goal you want to achieve. I don't know if this helps, but I think and in the end, it's really important to really think this through. What are we doing? And therefore we use, as Triodos, we try to be very conscious how we use, so the conscious use of money is one of the phrases we always use. Very conscious about how do we use the money to achieve that impact. And we, as a financial institution, do that not ourselves, it's always our customers that make that impact in the end. So that's also very nice to be here and to see all those customers in the UK. In the end, it's your impact, and we only facilitate that impact.
So we talked earlier with Nancy, the director, the artistic director at the theatre, about storytelling. And slightly touched on the idea that a lot about the way our world works, and in a sense, the word eco, which we throw about so much, the origin of that word is from ancient Greece, oikos, which means home.
Yeah.
So in a sense, we're talking about how we run our homes,
Yeah.
the wider world. So in terms of economy, that's how humans run the world. How do you think, the stories that we tell ourselves, how does that shape the economy and therefore that sort of impact in...
Yeah, maybe it's good to go to this slide, which is also here. If we talk about our home, and so this is our home, this is the world, we see all kinds of problems. We see our troubled relationship with our ecosystem, to put it mildly. We see unequal inequality in terms of income, in terms of opportunities, in terms of wealth. And this is how we treat our home, so how we treat the ecosystems, which are the basis of our homes, but also how we treat societies, how we treat other people. But this is only part of the story, because we always tend to concentrate on what we see, but the root cause of all this is the story we have of that home. So the economic story and how we perceive that, how we do that in the end. Yeah, I always feel ashamed when I'm in the UK and I'm the only non-native person, so that you accept that. And the question here is then, what is in the end the root cause? And the root cause is how we define that home. So how we see that economy. So what are the rules? What are the values? What is us the story of our time? Like I said before, we create our own story. We capture it in formulas. We also do it in the financial sector. Then we say, at Triodos, we say we have impact, risk, and return. What the rest of the financial sector normally says is risk and return. But it is defined, that return, that financial return, by how you see the future. And if you only define it in a financial way, in a reductionist financial way, you forget the rest. And then you get this. Then you get all the consequences that you see, but you forget the root cause, and the root cause is a very financialized financial system where you only look at the financial consequences of what you do. And that is at the core of our impact story, that you say, okay, this is what we have. How can we go on?
Mm-hmm. So in a sense, I mean, I guess the invisible part of that image that we're looking at there is the story of our economy. Yep. And that story at the moment is growth. That growth is good. Yep. Growth is, perpetual growth is possible. Yep. Just very briefly, what would a degrowth story be?
Yeah, that was what Bevis said before. I talk a lot about degrowth. Because in the end, if you accept that this will not work in the end, you have to reimagine how the world can look like. And that reimagination of society means that it needs to dematerialize. It needs to be so progress needs not to be defined only in a material way. It is about a society, it's about caring for each other, it's about well-being, it's about health, it's about stuff that if you ask a person, where do you get happy from, that's about that kind of story that you get. So the transition from this economy that is not working to a degrowth economy is the new paradigm we have to discuss in the end.
Mm-hmm. And that sort of leads us to the sort of transition.
Yeah, let's go to the transitions. Yeah. Because that's fundamental in our story, and that's also a little bit new. If you talk about impact, I said forward-looking, you have to think about a transformation of the system, and a transformation consists of multiple transitions. And a transition or a transformation is an inherently complex and unknown process. So this gives a challenge also for a financial institution, that you say, oh yeah, but we want to steer on something, and now we say, we don't know exactly where to steer on. We only know that we need to go to a sustainable place. Mm-hmm. And every year we have to rethink what we should do, what we should finance to get there. And we also have, and that's what's in this picture, but we don't have time to discuss it fully, what you really should change in your thinking, so in your mental model to get there. So it's it's not only thinking in the same way we did before, but differently. So not only about efficiency, but about resilience, not only about profit maximizing, but also about value creation. So that kind of stuff is what you have to reimagine.
So this is like, system change.
This is system change.
That we hear about, but this is actually trying to put some, define what that would actually look like. Insofar as how that works in different sectors, because we will shortly be inviting some of the Triodos customers who are working in different sectors, but can you just walk us through how you see that?
Yeah, this is what we did, and it's on our website. We made a vision towards a regenerative economy, and we said in the end, okay, it's very complex. It's transformation of the system, and Triodos is a small player. We talked before about we want to change the financial sector, we want to change everything, but how can we make it as tangible as possible to also steer our strategy on it? And that means we have to split it up into different transitions. And then always the problem comes in, because this took months or even a year to come up with 5 transitions, and always the problem comes in, okay, then we do the energy transition, then people say, yeah, but it has to be inclusive. Yes, of course. So they're completely interlinked. But if you take them one by one, and it's not a sector, it's a transition, which is sometimes a value chain and sometimes more complex. But if you take, so I always try to tell the story. It's the soil we have. It's what grows in it. It's what grows on it. It's what's in it, so that then you start with food and agri, so that's what grows, and you want to do it in the most sustainable way. You want to have regenerative agriculture, you want to have sequestration and that kind of rewilding, that kind of stuff. Then what's in the ground, so also you want to use your resources as efficiently as possible and as long as possible, so going from a linear to a circular economy, also with different kinds of business models. Then the third one is, of course, the fossil fuel-free economy. So the energy transition, and that's not only about renewable energy, but also about less energy use, about electrification and all what's storage and all what belongs to that. So these 3 are the ecosystem side. And the other 2 is about us, is about communities, is about how we live together. And the last one is about us as a person, so the well-being as a person. And when you have all of this, and what we currently are doing is trying to see, okay, but what are the leverage points in that transition that Triodos can either finance or influence in terms of our change finance agenda, as we call it. And how that comes together helps us as Triodos to understand what we can do, but also in the end will help transformation towards a more regenerative society, which is very easy to say.
Easy to say, and is actually happening in a small way, but with a number of Triodos customers. I'd like to invite onto the stage at this to almost demonstrate at least one of these sectors for now. The trustee of a national rewilding charity called HEAL, Jan Stannard, and along with Jan, the head of relationship management at Triodos and one of the bank's leads in nature-based investment, Simon Crichton. So please welcome to the stage. Hi, Jan. So what we're going to try and do is land what I call the high altitude thinking, the theoretical side of things that Hans has walked us through into something that's actually happening in real life and starting on the ground, soil. So, well, I was going to start with Simon actually. The conversation that we've had with Hans has touched on this idea of the transition, the interlinking transitions in food and resources, well-being. I understand that this is now a big focus for Triodos, these nature-based solutions. Can you give some background on that?
Yeah, no problem at all. It's actually feeling a lot tougher gig after the breakout session, having 2 customers coming up and challenging me on it straight away. Yeah. So the knowledge is out there. It's great amongst our customers and hopefully our co-workers as well. We've been supporting organisations working on tackling the most challenging environmental issues facing us over the last 30 years through the smart energy solutions and maybe the circular economy. And many of you will know that we've been supporting organic agriculture as a nature-friendly farming method to produce our food. But quite frankly, we've got to face the fact that we've just not been doing enough, and we've not really been reaching as far as we need to. And that's true of the financial system as well as Triodos. We've really got to do more and play a greater role in supporting nature, restoring the damages of the past, and really hitting our net zero challenge as well. Much of this current discussion is about the funding gap. You know, government is putting some money in. We've got the land management policies, so there's a little bit. But actually, the greater challenge is effectively designing the structures and creating the markets to be able to facilitate the investment needed. It needs to come from a lot of different areas. We as a team have become much more proactive. I mean, we've got Bevis as a leader. Let's face it, it's going to come from that background. But seeking those investable models. And Bevis mentioned earlier the WIRE project. That was the landscape scale project. I was talking to that customer out in the breakout session. And you might actually, many of you might have actually invested in Trees for Life. So actually, they opened the world's first rewilding centre this month. And we've got to continue stretching ourselves, finding those lending solutions. And quite frankly, I'm privileged to be sat next to Jan, because let's face it, this is really an innovative solution, and we've pushed ourselves, both ourselves, and finding a solution.
Well, Jan, let's bring you in then. Welcome. It's lovely to see you. Tell us a bit about HEAL, about the work you do.
Yes, so thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful to be here. And let's start with a never-before-seen clip of a film that we would love to show you.
World premiere, no less.
Premiere, yeah.
We got the film coming up, the HEAL film. There we go. Yeah.
HEAL's mission is to raise money, buy land and rewild it, and our vision is a HEAL site in every English county. When we launched in March 2020, we set ourselves a deadline of acquiring our first site by the end of 2022, and we looked so hard. We looked in 8 counties. It took so long, and we just managed to find somewhere in the nick of time and acquired HEAL Somerset 48 hours before the end of 2022. Which is amazing.
God, windy. Oh my gosh. Here we are.
It looks lovely, doesn't it?
Does it look absolutely amazing?
Awesome.
And the sun's come out for us. The way we made it.
Our first site is a really beautiful place in a quiet part of the Somerset countryside. We've got miles of hedgerows, we've got trees scattered about, including oak trees, some lovely mature oaks. So the potential here for natural regeneration of trees and other species is amazing.
Smooth.
This beautiful land covers about 460 acres, a perfect size for nature to find the peace and quiet it needs to thrive.
I mustn't get emotional watching that because it's such a journey to get there. So HEAL was set up so that all of us together can make an immediate, positive and direct impact on nature recovery in this country. And so many people feel helpless in the face of nature loss and climate breakdown. And we're here to bring the hope and the optimism and the joy. And people can sponsor a little patch of that land and really connect themselves into a piece of rewilding countryside, know exactly where that land is, and I think most importantly, come and visit the site that they've helped to create. So I hope many of you know what rewilding is, but what's so amazing about this nature-led process is that you not only get the variety of wildlife back and plants, but you get abundance. So not one swift or one frog or one brimstone butterfly, but a sky full of swifts and a pond heaving with frogs and, teeming with butterflies. So that's the glory of it. And in the first years at HEAL Somerset, we will be focusing on the soil and the insects and the plant life, because once those start to thrive, the ecosystem itself begins to recover. And then in a few years' time, we'll be looking at bringing in small herds or small herds is probably not the word for pigs, but basically pigs, cattle and ponies who act as ecosystem engineers, and they the land is missing some processes if they're not there, so they'll be coming. And what's so exciting is that the evidence is that sites like this first one and other sites like ours triple or quadruple their biodiversity in 20 or 30 years, so it's a huge impact. So by protecting and restoring nature, our work has a holistic impact because it addresses lots of different issues, not just nature recovery. So first among equals is carbon sequestration. So as land naturally regenerates, the plants grow, scrub species like hawthorn and bramble get a foothold, and baby trees start to grow. And the carbon that they sequester goes into their roots, into the soil around it. But it's not just that. Rewilding also means that the soil heals and the organic matter goes up, which means that it's a better structure, it's better aerated, and when it rains, it holds the water. So rewilding helps flood management, for example, and not only that, it purifies the rain as it falls, so it takes pollutants out. So it has all these multiple effects. And the other wonderful effect about having a new place for nature is it's somewhere for you to come and find solace and calm and peace in a really busy world. So the contribution of this work connecting right to somebody's mental and physical health is there.
That sounds, I mean, it sounds beautiful. I almost feel very relaxed just listening to you describing all of that. I feel like disgusting having to ask this next question, therefore, which is how do you turn that into a viable, financially sustainable model?
Because this is the acid test, and we've done it really boldly. So we spent over 2 years developing a sustainable financial model, because Heal Somerset's the blueprint, and we want to replicate that in every county. And early on, we decided that what the financing had to do was enable a rapid response to these intertwined crises of climate and nature. And the solution was to partner with Triodos. Thank you, Triodos, who've made that lovely place you saw possible, using affordable lending from them, and that underpinned the acquisition of sites quickly. We repay that over time and as quickly as we can. And one of the ways we're doing that, which all of you, in fact, some of you may have done it, can do, is sponsor a 3 metre by 3 metre square of land with a What 3 Words address. And that means that funds that land forever, in perpetuity, and connects people to the land. It's really popular because it's such a direct way of making a difference. So we've put a big focus on support from businesses in our sustainable model. And businesses support us, I realise, in 6 ways, see if I can remember them all. Companies sponsor an acre. They will be sending their volunteers. They will sponsor the site. They give us donations. And we have something brilliant called an employee square scheme. So an employer can name a square for their employees, and we have lots of those. And I know there's another one I've missed, but let's not worry about that. And natural capital is going to be really big for us. We were awarded, amazingly, for a 2-year-old charity, a big 6-figure grant from the government in a natural environment investment readiness fund. So that means it's about mobilising private finance into nature funding. And that focuses a lot on carbon, on biodiversity net gain and biodiversity credits. And we know that this is real because we know projects that have got these income flows, and we have got that in the offing once that work is underway. And then if we come to the sites themselves, it's like a business. We're a charity like a business. So we've identified over 30 revenue streams, that's donation streams and trading streams. So they range from tours of the site. So, yeah, I better not say it because it kind of gives away the proposition. But anyway, you'll be able to come when we first open, and talks, workshops, yeah. So, and if you've got a 3 by 3 square, we're going to get volunteers to survey it so you know what's in it. So, yeah, lots of ways to get support on the sites themselves.
Okay. So, Simon, Jan just mentioned natural capital. It sometimes jars against, people. I'm one of them. They're two words I'm not a fan of hearing together. However, we are in the real world. How does a bank like Triodos navigate these apparently conflicting sensibilities?
Yeah, and I absolutely recognise that feeling. I recognise it myself as well. But I think mentioned earlier in terms of the challenges we face, we've got to be bold. And Triodos has always been an innovator to be able to ultimately restore our natural systems. We always try and look at the whole rather than the singular. And in this space, for example, it's important in reconnecting to the people and engaging with communities, which I know certainly HEAL have done, and other organisations we look to work with are in that space as well. Because actually, if we're going to succeed, actually society has got to value nature. They've got to give value to it. Otherwise, we're just not going to achieve it alone. Government are trying to take small steps, as I mentioned earlier, with the environmental land management schemes. That's redirecting public money, all of our money, which is much needed, but there's way more than that required. And international and big companies are making commitments which are also really welcome, but they're just really not going to be able to drive that change alone. And this is one area, in terms of Bevis saying that he was delighted to be bottom of the chart. This is one area we've got to overshoot. Yeah. In terms of we've got to do better than we think we need today, because actually we'll always be slipping behind. And regarding carbon and biodiversity markets, I agree there's a lot of poor behaviour around this area, and thinking people are immediately jumping to offsetting as the first solution in their progress. But we realise, and we try and talk to our customers and all our customers across the sectors, that actually it's about reducing our emissions initially and trying to limit the harm that we do in the development, for example, and thinking about the Dutch head office we've got there in terms of the great setting there. As if you look it up on the website, it's absolutely fantastic in terms of a building and the way it's been developed. And that's really key to then being able to say, we've done all we can, now we look to offsetting. And if you think about it, we take this really seriously. It was mentioned before, our holistic approach to AS 1 to 0 in balancing our impact, and that including our investment with our customers on the planet, through our investment in investing in such like as HEAL. So this is part of the balancing act in terms of reducing the emissions as much as we can in certain areas, the social inclusion lending book, housing associations, and balancing that out, trying to reduce emissions, but balancing out those harms that we all do with the investment in such like as HEAL.
Okay, so, Hans, you've got the opportunity to sort of meet and hear about this project. Where does this sit in your picture of the transitions?
This sits foremost in the first part, so that's mostly about land, food and agriculture, but it can also be in resources. It doesn't matter, it's also about rewilding and restoring nature. But I think what's more important also in this story, it's really about trying to make a new business model, so to recreate so it's also about the commons, how to attract different revenue streams from people, from communities. And I think that's even more important, at least for the financial sector, to understand that you can do things differently with different business model. Yeah, I don't like the word business model, but a revenue model maybe, to do new stuff, which is, and that's also what you discussed, that there's a conflict between normal finance, which is inherently extractive, and you want to rewild, you want to restore stuff. So how do you combine it? And I think that's the place where we need to go. But it's a different kind of logic. And it's so important that we try to experiment and to show that you can do it in this way. Because, and we discussed already before, it's really a wild west in terms of carbon credits and nature-based solutions and what's going on. And that's why I really love this. We have to show that you can do it in the right way, with the right governance, with the communities in place, and that you can make the difference there.
Fantastic. Please join me in thanking Jan and Simon. Thank you both. And I'm going to invite onto the stage for the second customer panel. This is moving into a completely different area from the nature-based solutions. This is societal change. And I'd like to welcome the CEO of Elite Supported Employment Agency, Andrea Wayman, and the relationship manager at Triodos, Sarah Johnson. Please take a seat. So we're just going to get straight into it. Andrea, you work in the employment field, employing people with disabilities that need extra support, and you've been doing this since 1989. Mm-hmm. So you founded the charity Elite in 1994. So you're not a newcomer to the sector, safe to say. Could you give us a brief overview of your charity and the work you do?
Okay, so just a whistle-stop tour about us as an organisation. As you said, the charity was set up in 1994 and we had a really small grant of £34,000 to work with 12 adults with learning disabilities at that time. And if I wind on almost 30 years, that has increased to work with 500 people with disabilities or disadvantage each year. Across what we have now created as 4 social enterprises. The first one is an employment agency, and the supported employment is quite different. It isn't just about finding a job for someone, it's helping them to sustain it. So we have staff who go into workplaces, learn the job, and then bring that new candidate into the workplace and support those with intensive support until they're independent. In our social enterprises, we deal with document management, and we also deal with garment manufacturing, and we've got a training organisation. We're quite fortunate in Wales to have the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. So that's brought things on steadily in terms of inclusive employment for people with disabilities and disadvantage over the last number of years. And for me, employment is a catalyst to a better quality of life. You know, the individuals that I support, and I think we'll see some photographs coming up shortly of my colleagues, you know, our social enterprises employ a considerable number of people with disabilities. There is a job there for everybody, and we think that's the importance, that the person is matched to the job that suits them. But, you know, that means that people become financially independent, they're less dependent on welfare benefits, they're less dependent on health and social services in that respect, but they also become quite a member of their communities and gain status. You know, all of us have gone to an event and someone says, "What do you do?" My colleagues can now say, "I work here, I work there." So quite a considerable amount of what we do is taking people to move into jobs in the community. Our social enterprises are stepping stones that take people then, once they've gained confidence and skills, into jobs in the community. And just a small example of that is that people come into us with no qualifications whatsoever, and we've got 97% of people, because we use alternative methods, gaining qualifications, going out and working then in our economy and contributing to that.
Okay, thank you. Sarah, so Triodos, I mean, we've been talking about nature and nature-based solutions. I've hinted that I also, personally, my conviction is, you know, you got to look after people almost first, you know, because then hopefully the rest follows. So Sarah, with Triodos being known as a green bank, how do you sort of fit in financing organizations like Elite?
Yeah, Elite is quite unique, but in general, it's not all about the financials like it is with most high street banks. Mm-hmm. For us, we've got a thing called Mission Fit, and we cover most sectors so long as business, organisation or charity is mission fit. And by that, it means that they make a positive change, either socially, culturally or environmentally. And you had a question earlier about the living wage. That's something that we also consider as part of Mission Fit, as well as sustainability, how they treat their staff, whether the staff have continual professional development, the buildings that they work in, you know, are they sustainable, or is there an action plan to get them sustainable? And if there is, then we'll help them get there. We don't expect them to be fully sustainable when they come to us, but if they've got aspirations to be net zero or carbon zero, then we'll help them to get there. Mm-hmm. So customers can come from all sorts of different sectors, really. It's all to do as well with the motivation of the directors and the shareholders or the people that are involved. So if you go out and see a customer and you can see that that customer is all about building their pension pot and moving on in the next few years. We're not interested, really. We'd like to go out and see a customer and build a relationship up over time. We like to see the business grow, and we'd like to grow with that business. So it's not all about profit, it's about people and planet.
So that relationship is obviously really key right from the get-go. And Andrea, can you say sort of, in creating an organization like Elite, that's trying to look at both, well, the societal impact, but also environmental impact, are you also trying to add to that carbon neutral into the mix?
Most definitely, yes. So one of the social enterprises that we set up in 2015, which is about document management, right from the outset, we said 100% of the waste documents that came through to us, the confidential documents, we have to shred them. 100% of that since day one has been recycled. And we work with stationers then that have a paper that can be recycled up to 9 times. So they go in, they sell the paper to, various customers. We're at the other end collecting that so that it can be recycled. But, we've done an eco-animal bedding, but on top of that, we want to be quite unique and lead the way in this field. Because we now own the building, because of the loan of the mortgage from Triodos, that has meant that we can put into place the plans we've always had to operate our buildings, our equipment, our vehicles by alternative energy. And so we're now consciously exploring all of the avenues open to us in relation to that, to have a heavy investment in that. We know that that will save us quite a lot of money. And that's quite important to us because the more money that we have to reinvest creates more jobs, more training opportunities, more volunteering opportunities for the people that we want to bring into society.
So, Hans, I'm just going to bring you in because listening to Andrea say all that, to me, that just sounds like it's adding an enormous amount of work to probably what is already a big workload. Is trying to match and fit all these values, is there a risk that creates a drag, slows down the business?
Yeah, no one said it would be easy.
Yeah.
Right? Now, I think that's always a challenge. This story, but also the previous one. I think doing business in a different way, like being a social enterprise or doing rewilding, is pioneering in a sense. And if you want to do everything, so not only the social side, but also the ecological side, yes, that's complex. But at least we acknowledge that it is complex and try to do it. And of course, if you can replicate it, if you do it more, it will be easier. And that's also the journey we have to go on. Also the narrative we try to reinvent. That's what we do here. So this is my theoretical, conceptual stuff, but then in practice, which is much more interesting, I think, in the end. that it actually happens. And also what you see here is this is really trying to fill a gap in society, which is left by markets and the government. You try to fill that gap, and that's where a lot of these initiatives belong. So try to do it differently, with partly market instruments, but as I understand, also with regulation from the government, which also helped this.
It's a question that may sound obvious, and there may be an obvious answer to it, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Why, Andrea? Why do all of this? And where does that come from?
I think it's passion. My family members, so I'd lived experience of it. But it's also about that day-to-day when you see lives changing. It's just a workforce, as you can see in the photographs. One of the biggest problems we have is people taking their annual leave. They just want to come to work. They want to be part of society. So that's my driving force, quite honestly.
So that is it. So lovely. Well done. And Sarah, for you, how does that fit in, I guess, in terms of your work with Triodos and working so closely with customers, where does that fit in terms of your values?
Well, Elite is and Andrea is so passionate and dedicated. One of the things that really stuck out to me when I went out to meet her for the first time, you normally go out for about an hour and a half to meet a customer and get a feel for the place and do the first initial chat. I was there for over 3 hours because she had so much to talk about and she was so passionate and everybody was so friendly and you could just see the delight on people's faces to actually be at work, and it was fantastic. But Triodos has been lending to charities and businesses for over 40 years now, and COVID has made a big difference to the way that people work and the way that people think, especially with home working and things like that. One of the things that we have picked up on and that has increased substantially over the last few years is employee ownership trusts, where businesses will have a succession plan or might not have a succession plan because they haven't got children to pass a business on to, might automatically have thought of management buyouts in the past where they just sell a business and they move out of the business and move on and retire. But COVID has changed that, and COVID has made people more thoughtful. I think people are more aware about their employees and what they need to do to keep them and retain them. And also it's how to make sure that the social impact evolves and that you keep the ethos and the values in the business. By doing the employee ownership trust and passing the business on to the employees, you're doing that. A good example of that is Riverford Organics, which most people will know about, which is one of our customers. They've done a similar thing with their employees. They've sold the business to the employees. So I think things and finances and the way that we lend is changing. It's evolving, and we're going more towards thinking about people, thinking about consequences, and the same applies to nature and everything else, really.
The whole system. Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Because Bevis mentioned polycrisis, which I can think of other words for, but probably not in this context. But we often think about how much stress it places us under and all the negatives, but it can also kind of get people to rally together as well. Andrea, thank you so much. Sarah as well for joining us. Please join me again with a round of applause. Good luck.
Thanks.
Good luck. So we're going to move on now to the third and final customer panel, who are tackling the energy transition head-on and decarbonising transport. So I'd like to invite to the stage the founder and CEO of Human Forest, Agustin Gilisasti, and the head of project finance looking after renewable energy and sustainable infrastructure, that's a mouthful, of Triodos Bank, Amandine Teto. Please welcome them to the stage. Hi. Agustin. Today is a big day. Welcome.
Exciting day for us.
You've got some news, which it's in my script, but I'm going to give you the pleasure of being able to share the news with everybody.
Yeah, we're announcing a Series A of 15 million, including 5 million from Triodos Bank. So this will allow us to increase to the double of the number of e-bikes and save more 1,000 tons of CO2 this year.
Okay, fantastic. So you heard it here first. This is literally hot off the press. It's not even on the press, actually. This is literally your first announcement of that. Could you give an overview, though, of the organization? We now know you've got like a milestone achievement today. Tell us a bit more about the work that you're doing.
Yeah, maybe why Human Forest, you will ask. So this idea started in the Amazonas. So same as in a forest, trees capture the CO2. In Human Forest, you and us using our truly green e-bikes and 10-minute free, you avoid emitting CO2. So we are in the same path of reducing the amount of CO2 of the planet. So how does it work? You have every day 10-minute free, and with that we can achieve this amazing goal and people can really save that amount of CO2 from the planet.
So you've got a film that you wanted to share. I don't know if we've got that to show our audience, the film about Human Forest.
Wake up,
Well done.
This is the greenhouse.
The real, okay.
Yeah, so it's super important that we do everything with renewable energy, and all our operation, the gardeners, the guys who swap the batteries, they use electric vehicles. So we are the only micro mobility company to achieve B Corp certification and also Verra certification. So very proud of what we have done, and thank you for allowing us to be the double and make a huge reforestation in London.
That's amazing. I mean, the energy in that is actually really fun. And I mean, like, just, emotional, human energy, creative energy. It's fantastic. How do you intend to move the work forward now with this latest round of funding?
Well, good question. First of all, we will have the double of the fleet, so we will be able to reforest to more cities and London in particular this time. And also we will invest in sustainability, so we will be able to have a part to recycle the parts, the batteries, and I will say the most important part, we will invest in technology. So, for example, at the beginning it was super hard to make people understand that they can be part of the solution using our bikes every day. So we create a gamification tool. So what is that? We call the tree coins. So each mile that you ride in a human forest, it is the same amount of CO2 that a tree captures in a day. So after 5 miles, we give you a tree coin. And what can you do with that tree coin? You can exchange for extra more minutes or even buy things from our partners. For example, coffee, co-work space. So it is quite cool because at the end, this will allow us to give even more free minutes and make them understand that they can be part of the solution. And this works behind with the AdTech side of the company that allow us to get revenue from that side. So any sustainable partner can advertise through our platform. So that's
wow, so you're actually able to, on some level, maybe a sort of crude measurement, but give people like a visceral sense of how much energy they're using, like physically, just by using the bikes, but also giving you an idea of how much work an individual tree might be able to do at certain points in its life cycle. That's really fascinating.
Yeah. For example, we just launched our new app, and you can see like how is the impact for each ride that you are doing in the planet. So it is quite cool because now people really understand that even each ride, for example, from here to the station, we are saving the same amount of CO2 that 2 trees just going from here to the station because we use renewable energy and we are trying to reduce the amount of cars. So it is quite cool how it works.
Wow, I don't envy the person who has to do the maths for that, but
70 grams per kilometer.
But what are the challenges of doing something like this? I mean, certainly you're working in London, big city, millions. What are the challenges there? But also by contrast, are there different challenges in a small town, for example? I mean, I live in a small town. I'd love to see more of this, but are there different challenges?
I would say like the big challenge here, for us, it is price. I think people is struggling with the economic crisis, and what we are trying to do here, it is to bring more bikes on the street. And the challenge it is that sometimes it is not aligned with what the authorities want. So we will really need to work together and try to reduce the amount of cars from the street and give more space for e-bikes or for sustainable solutions that will help us to everyone to move from A to B in a more fun and sustainable way.
Yeah. Definitely a challenge in this country sometimes with the weather, but on a good day, I can really totally imagine that. Hans, this is an interesting one because this is almost touching on several different of those transition sectors. How do you see that?
Yeah, you can take apart as well-being, so health, but it's of course also the energy transition, and then you can say, so also in the Netherlands there's a lot about electric cars, probably also here in the UK as a future of mobility, but it's definitely not the future of mobility, it's a step in the transition. So you can also think e-bikes can contribute to a different system, to a different infrastructure. If you have enough e-bikes and people go, it's better to go by bike, not by e-bike, to be honest, but I'm Dutch, so...
Yeah, it's a flat country as well.
And it's easy. No, but in London, and so it's also in the end, and that's with all these business models, it's trying to to contribute in a transition towards the endpoint should be that you have a better bicycle infrastructure and that you have a change of behavior of people in the end, that it becomes more sustainable, because we know from research that the combination of e-bikes and bikes and public transport is a better combination than cars and public transport, because they're rivals, let's say. So there's a lot, and of course also with this project, it's a combination of different business models, different ideas that all come together in one, and that's what I really like in those transitions. Really innovative clients trying to do different stuff.
Okay, so Amandine, I just want to bring you in here. So, you know, in your role as a relationship with the customers, how would you advise people, you know, while you're lending in this sort of renewable space, to kind of get the balance of all these different transition sectors? How would you go about advising people?
Well, so we first started working, when we first started working with Human Forest, we were working with my team as to the best way we could accelerate our work in sustainable transport. This is clearly an area where a lot has to be done, and there is a key role to play in decarbonizing the economy. And Human Forest is it's a great example of a company that it's innovating. As you say, it's clearly about reducing carbon, but it's also about promoting new behaviors, about connected modes of transport, and really driving some behaviors and around. And yeah, when we started working with Human Forest, I have to admit that quite quickly we found some values aligned. And yeah, we clearly see the match, and it started quite quickly. Sometimes it's not that easy to see the match, and there are different conversations. But if I may, our work is also about demonstrating how these sectors can attract financing, this mobility. Is not it's a sector that's quite new to debt finance. And in Triodos, we're always thinking of the best way we can catalyze funding to the areas of the economies that need it the most, in particular those innovative business models. And I think that through our work and as we were evolving and through all these months of work, we really sort of structured something that we not only think is replicable, but scalable as well. So this is it's about even innovating the business, but also the way that these are financed.
Okay. So, I mean, listening to you guys and, you know, the previous customers that we've had, I've heard it said that economy and economics is like driving using the rearview mirror. But it feels to me that this work is actually the opposite of that. It's actually driving the way we should be looking forward. How radical a difference, a change is that, would you say, in terms of, as an economist?
As an economist, yeah. Well, I'm an economist, but I'm also a person. And if I read, yeah, sometimes different. No, but as a person, I think we don't have so much time to wait and to have incremental change. But I'm very happy if I hear these entrepreneurs, these customers that really try to make a difference, and that gives hope. So I'm normally sitting at my desk in the Netherlands in that beautiful office, and then you can think of all conceptual stuff, and then you also see the time ticking away, and then you see that sometimes. If you look at carbon emissions, if you look at how far we go now or not go with the circular economy, our economy is completely linear, and what time it takes for public policies to do anything, then I'm happy that there are people that are doing real stuff in the real economy and show that we can make the difference. And that's really positive. And what I really hope, and that's also what you said, that we can scale that up. So, and that's also part of our agenda as Triodos, also in the rest of Europe, is to show that it is possible to finance those clients, to do those activities, and to make the difference. And I hope that will accelerate real soon in the coming years.
Fantastic. Please join me, everyone, in thanking
I have a surprise.
Uncle Sten. Sorry, don't thank them yet.
Yes. So for everyone who is in London and can use our bikes, if they use the code TREDOS, they will get 30 minutes free.
Well, there you go. That was worth waiting for. Thank you so much. And Hans, thank you as well.
Thank you very much.
That was definitely worth waiting for. Thank you. So I hope by now you sort of understand why at the beginning of this whole event I said my inner skeptic is quietly intrigued. I'm finding it really fascinating listening to people that I imagine sort of work in this beast of the financial and business sector actually using the language like values and impact and change and system change and sort of music to my ears really actually. So last but by absolutely no means least, and to be honest I don't think our next guest needs any introduction, but I will. I'd like to invite onto the stage the businesswoman, broadcaster, author, activist, general badass, I'd say, Mary Portas. Hello. Welcome. Yeah, that's perfect. Wow. Hold on to your seats now, everyone. Oh, my goodness. Mary, so the business and corporate world, this is your ecosystem, if you like. I've always imagined this as a place, as a woman, that you need the shoulder pads, you need the attitude, you need the heels to, crush the competitors. Yet you wrote a book, well, you've written a number of books, but one of them, Work Like a Woman. And, my idea of being the kind of, work like a woman but think like a man, that's not the concept behind this at all. So I guess maybe the place to start is how did you find your way through this world as a woman?
Well, I think in the early days, probably badly, because everyone thinks, oh, how amazing, you were on the board of a big business by the age of 31, but I didn't. There's a wonderful parable I often talk about that David Foster Wallace used many times, and it's a little story of two little fish swimming through the water, and a big fish comes along and says, "Morning, boys, how's the water?" And the little fish swim on, and then one little fish turns to the other and says, "What's water?" And it's such a beautiful parable because I was swimming in a world of consumerism and luxury brands, thinking that I was doing really well by selling a lot of stuff to people and telling them that this was going to make their life better. If you have this wonderful Gucci bag, you're going to be so cool and wear it at. And I was part of that story. I bought into it too, when I got my car, when I got the house. I didn't know any better. I thought that was the world of business, and certainly the world of consumerism that I made a lot of money in. And this really is a mea culpa, and I got it so wrong. But the reason I wrote Work Like a Woman was very much that the structures and the systems that we've worked under and lived under and been guided under are fundamentally not fit for a beautiful world. And but we believe it is because society's told us that. And so we've been living under a patriarchy that and this isn't anti-men just because the word patriarchy is in there. Slightly. This is a system that's been created across religion, across politics, across business, that's been based around winners, losers, individualism, and what we can all achieve and attain in life. And the more money you make, the more you're held up. The tenets of success are power, fame, and money. And quite fundamentally, that doesn't bring joy, that isn't bringing well-being to us, and it's certainly not looking after our planet. So about 10 years ago, in fact it was 10 years ago, on a Monday morning my little son came into the world, my little baby son who's now 10, Horatio. And on the Saturday, my eldest son, Milo, was going out into the world to university. And I remember so vividly, I mean, I cried most of that week. You imagine the emotions that were going through. But I remember vividly packing Milo up and sitting with him and saying to him, so he was off to do PPE, and I said, what do you think you'll do afterwards? And he said, I don't know, Mum. I suppose, with economics, I'll go into the world of finance. And I just remember me going, no, no. Because I looked at this young man who was sensitive, was beautiful. This was my son, and I didn't want him to go into that world. But here's the thing: I also didn't want him to go into the world I was in. It was the same show, I once, worked for Topshop. That was owned by Philip Green. Let's just park that for a minute. Hold the vision, because I'm going to get somewhere with that one. And I just thought. But I've worked within that construct to be successful. And at the time, Sheryl Sandberg had written a book called Lean In, and it was hugely successful. And I just felt, I want to do the opposite. I want to lean out. And yet I thought, am I going to sound a complete Burke? And so I started writing it, and I thought, I want to work like me as a woman and everything that comes with. And it comes with a lot of stuff that women naturally do. And I really do bear with me on this. Even my daughter's like, Mum, are you sure you're going to call it that? They're going to go after you, all the guys. I said, no, because all the stuff that we do as mothers, as family members, as sisters, are built on empathy, so much of it. And yet, when we go into business, that's put aside. And I remember years and years ago, Anita Roddick, who was an incredible supporter of women, and I was this sort of young, feisty little girl in business, and she just rang me when I was at Harvard and said, I see you're doing great things. And she just met me for a cup of tea, and we talked about stuff. And I remember her saying so vividly that she has these great men who work with her, and she's often gone round for supper with them, and they're in the kitchen in their aprons and, feeling very much at home, doing the washing up and whatever. And she said they get into the boardroom and they become utter bastards. And I go, well, what's that about?
Yeah.
And they believed they had to be that. So that was my start of my journey. And Work Like a Woman became me opening up and discussing things like vulnerability and love and kindness and feeling that, this doesn't feel right to me, and that's okay to be like that. And it just brought the journey more and more to this next level of when I started to look at actually the impact of everything, not just how we work, but what it does to our planet.
Wow. So this definitely, there's a ring of this, it spoken differently that I heard, from what Hans said when we started with his conversation about, we talked about values, and almost that being the kind of bedrock, that's the compass that sets the direction of travel.
Yeah.
I have to say, I'm a mother of a daughter and a mother of a son as well. And I struggle with the narrative, and you've already touched on that, sort of the words like patriarchy and stuff, because, yes, I want my daughter to be all the things that we want our young women to be, but I also want my son, I don't even know what I want for him anymore, or what he might want for himself, frankly. Wow, this is getting deep. Anyway, where I'm going with this is, how do you carry that into your working environment? How do you, bring your working like a woman sensibilities into an environment where possibly, and this is me really casting out, where maybe the men in that space have had that trained out of them for whatever reason, and the women as well. Like, how do you bring kindness into this environment?
Oh, you have to start with it being a belief system and a value system that you all share. That really has to be the start. Purpose has been bandied around a lot in business, and it is deeply important, but purpose often is very modern businesses saying, we've written our purpose, and it becomes a sort of manifesto that slightly becomes a marketing front. This is really about living the values and sharing them. And some don't come on the journey with you. That's okay. But actually, once you start doing it and show a different way, it's extraordinary how it opens up. So, I mean, I really put it into business when, just post-COVID, I actually really completely restructured my whole business to work with businesses in the business, what I call beautiful business. And I took Work Like a Woman into the kindness economy, and actually, the Work Like a Woman is a cultural behavior for business, but actually the greater picture is creating an economy that sees the, and it would be really helpful if government understood this, that the economy is a subset of the ecological world. And so beautiful businesses feed into a kindness economy. And when I use the word beautiful, it's not about skin deep, it's about a deep truth. It's not about, you know, we're all going to be wearing knitted muesli jumpers and making no money. No. Even though some people will. Welcome easily. It's about, you know, the people that we just heard on stage. This is a business that we do, but every part of it is beautiful. So it gives back to society. It makes social progress. It cares for the people that work in it. And we think everything goes through a filter. A filter. And when you start to put that culture in where you start questioning everything that you do through a filter, it just becomes a way of being. And that then becomes a way of being that people, even if they leave, look for other businesses that become that. And you start to have this movement of social change happening. So it is the only way forward. And it's really funny because, it's not so funny, but it's when you see businesses who aren't doing it, you start to feel it's very obvious of the sort of dinosaurs of it. It feels like there's a we have this kind of hospice of businesses that are actually are dying and will die, and that we have this sort of midwifery happening over here of a new way of working and living. And we don't read about this in the news. We don't hear about it. The news is so skewed. But there is a really growing consciousness that's happening. And it's going to be people like us coming together to make those social shifts happening and talking about this stuff as the modern way of living in the future. So I spent the day in Parliament yesterday because I'm co-chair of the Better Business Act. And in the early days when I started looking at this, you knew that the big businesses are going to come out with the same old crap, you know? We give jobs, this is what the economy needs to get back on our feet. And at first you're sort of bamboozled with it because it's such a language that's been such a part of society for so long. But once you see it for what it is, it's so freeing. It's so freeing because you're able to look at them and you know you go up against them in a very different language, a very different way of being. And it's so beautiful that they don't that argument doesn't fit anymore. And you get to a point where you have the dinosaurs over there with the arguments. I mean, let's look at some of the facts on that. I'm doing a program, not meant to mention it, but I am. A big documentary is coming out this year. On the climate and going up against some of these businesses. When you look at the oil and gas industry, it's immoral. It's immoral. You know, we are talking about they've made more money than ever. The first time they paid tax in the last 5 years, right? We've had a chief exec who's just left, I think it was Shell, after getting a 50% rise to 10 million. They're making something like 365 million a minute. The profits are insane. They are being aided by a government that gives them 2.2 billion tax breaks. We know the banks that are investing. You saw the Richard Curtis film, to 37 billion behind these guys. And if I'm being kind, it's because these dinosaurs aren't creative enough. That's my kind line. Wait to get on the not kind one. And, you know, or actually, no, if I'm being kind, it's a fear. You know, when you see people, you hold on to what you knew. We saw it during COVID. How do we get through this? You hang on to because what we know, that's got us through before. But actually, this is not fit for the territory that the world is now in.
So if I'm being kind, it's fear. If I'm being unkind, it is because they lack creativity and they lack a moral imagination for the future.
So, yeah. So this is your bread and butter. It's watching brands and it's predicting what's coming.
It's you know, my father was, it sounds so sort of, but my kind of thing that's always been, I've had this sort of sensitivity to what I think is the next thing, which has worked for fashion and luxury.
Yeah.
But now it's very much around human behavior, and you see the shifts, and we are at this tipping point, and it's a bit like the novel The Sun Also Rises, Hemingway's novel, when a drunk veteran from the war gets asked, how did you lose all your money? And he says, you know, slowly and then really fast. And we're at that. And I know, I mean, I get invited to speak to so many, and big corporates and big businesses. And 5 years ago, you would feel them sort of knocking you. It doesn't even happen now. It doesn't happen. But they might deep down be thinking, I disagree, but it's actually becoming culturally wrong to be so wrong. Do you know what I'm saying? So in the old days of when I was selling brands to people, it was an era of status symbols. You know, I wear Prada shoes, therefore I've made it. You know, I drive this car, so therefore. We are now moving into an era of status sentience, and it's gauche to be behaving like that. So the more that we can make status and modernity go with this route, the more we will win. We can't come about this in that sort of banging the drum. Mm-hmm. It has to have this modernity. So, for example, 12 years ago, I looked at the charity sector, and it was it was a really down at heel. If a high street was dying, if it had a charity shop and a chicken shop on it, the churs, and you know, they've got, and I'd speak to local councils. Am I all right with this? Because it's going right up my nose. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? My poor sound guy up there. Right. Can you hear me if I speak like that?
No. It does need to be with you near your mouth. Is that
okay?
We've got someone coming to the rescue.
It's my hair, darling.
We still get a good haircut. Okay. Are we there? Right. While he's doing that. Anyway,
Yeah.
So 12 years ago, I did this wonderful show called Mary Queen of Charity Shops. Thank you so much.
It wasn't meant to be a comedy. Do you know, Victoria Wood came up to me once and said, "Oh my God, I wish I'd written that show, Mary." I was like, "How fabulous!" But it was wonderfully hilarious, but so heartwarming. Mm-hmm. And I used to turn up to do the shots each morning, and I'd see the same people coming. You'd hear the bus arrive to go, shh, and off they'd come. And the average age would have probably been about 80 of these people who were giving their time and their love. And there was this wonderful sense of duty of these women particularly, and men who came into the shops, and you know, people would dump stuff outside them, and they'd pick in, you know, bin liners that had been on the street that dogs had weed on, and they'd go through them, and it was shocking what was in them. And there was a couple of old ladies that would get the toys, and they'd put a little price on them, and one was a Barbie with no head. I'm saying, you can't put that out there. Someone's donated it, dear. But there was a love, you know, it was, and I just thought, imagine if we took this as a business model, and I brought all the learnings that I had from the luxury world and put it into, you know, second-hand stuff. Oh, let's not even call it, let's say it's recycling, it's upcycling, it's... Anyway, I went to Save the Children, who were brilliant. In fact, I went to 5 charities and they turned it down, but Save the Children said, no, we'll do it. And so I opened up Mary's Living and Giving. And we just created shops that everything was beautiful within it. People, and because they were beautiful, I got all local artists, everybody donated their time for nothing. They made these places that were of respect and love, beautiful boutiques, so people gave better stuff. People then wanted to work in them, so I got young people that wanted to work. And we now have 26 and have raised 30 million. Right, so now second-hand fashion is the fastest growing in the fashion industry, faster than fast fashion. So there is hope, is what I'm saying. That was a very long-winded way of getting to it. But it's a way of looking at beauty and creating business that has true beauty at its heart, that actually gives back to society and does no harm. Now, that is probably one of the most beautiful, sexy briefs that we've ever had to work in. For the business world that I've been in, which was retail, we had the most boring 20 years of operationally sophisticated businesses that just knew how to get stuff to us, how quick, how fast, how cheap. There wasn't creativity there. Now we're going into a landscape where you're interviewing these people who are going, I've come up with a new idea and it's this way. Now that, to me, looks modern. So I look at and I talk about the modern future, leave the old dinosaurs there.
Do you think... So do you think it's just about being singularly focused on that new way of working? Because, when I hear that, I think, well, there's still, the dinosaurs are going to be there, and they're still there, and we still have to, do business on one level or another, or at least buy their products without having a choice at the moment for a lot of things. How do you maintain that in the face of, let's face it, in the corporate, in the world of politics as well? I think there's a statistic that there's proportionately more people that might sort of fit under the kind of sociopathic kind of profile in those worlds. Yeah. How do you bring kindness when you're not being met with that, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Well, because you have to show a new way. You have to show them and show the innovation at the heart of it. So most people want to know the answer. So show us who's done it well. And what they don't realise is that we are going into, this is all, there's no answers. We have no map to follow. We are going through the greatest crisis humanity has ever faced. So you want to still hang on to the way we've done it before? I mean, that's madness. That's the madness. So, but they all want the answers. They all want to know that I'm going to make the same amount of money and it's going to be okay. No, it's not. But you will be able to make money, but in a new way. And some I give as an example. My favourite example, the Philip Green one, hold it. I told you to hold on to that. So this was a guy that was, of course, he got knighted. And you get knighted for making basically a truckload of money. And this was a man who, 10 years ago, was it, extracted 2.2 billion in dividends, right, from his company. Wow. And that wasn't sort of written as, oh God, this is terrible. That was, oh, look at him, he's making all right. These icons that were put up there purely for making huge amounts of money, which fundamentally, in the heightened consumer days, was not difficult. 2019, I go to New York, and I happened to, my son, my eldest son, who's now living there, wanted to go and check out New York. I said, okay, let's go. And we went for a long weekend. I happened to be on the worst day. I arrived on Black Friday. Quelle horreur. Now, Black Friday is just got to be the biggest shit show that's ever happened. Of how can we sell as much stuff as cheap and basically get us all to panic and think it's a bargain.
That nobody actually really needs.
Nobody really needs. And it's probably going to be on sale at the same time in January, but we've got to, anyway, it's horrendous. Let's not even go there with it, right? So it was horrendous, New York, and it had that really, I wanted him to show him the energy of New York, the spa, but this was like that energy that was just, how much can you stuff yourself with? I mean, even the word consumerism, it says, you judge me by what I buy rather than who I am and how I live. So I said to him, look, come on, let's have a look at Patagonia. And I knew I'd been following Yvon Chouinard, who launched Patagonia for years, read his book, and so we go down to Patagonia, and in the window, this is Black Friday, there's just this one poster, picture of a beautiful Patagonia jacket, and it just says, don't buy this jacket. Recycle, reuse. And you were like, repair. That was the third one. There was another. And I was like, that is brilliant, right? That is innovative. That is extraordinary. You couldn't get in the shop. It was so busy. Nothing on sale. Totally. And what this man was doing was saying, these are my values. And his values were based around well-being of, you know, I want to go out, climb mountains, connecting with nature, connecting with earth. And these are the clothes you wear with it. Rafa's done a very beautiful job like that on cycling. You get all those men in Lycra around Regent's Park. Let's not go on that one. And I said to Milo, I said, this is a beautiful business. This is a beautiful business. And some of the things when you look at how he ran his business, so he realized that women were great within the business, but women normally have to give up at certain times, because he started back in the 70s and have childcare, and it's very expensive. And so he started a creche just there, and they'd all eat together, and you'd bring your kids in. And you know, when you've got kids and you go on holiday with another family, or 3 or 4 family who've got kids, it's fantastic. You go, you're on pool duty, I'm on the gin and tonics, and then you're on pool, well, not after the gin and tonics, you're not on pool duty, but you share, you know, and you take, and that's how he created this business. And even today, those women have grandchildren, and that their kids are working. It's just amazing. Anyway, Philip Green's business collapsed. Extraction, greed, gain. He has just handed into a trust, and his only shareholder, he says, is Mother Earth. And everything they will be doing will be fighting for the planet. And he's still making billions. So I say to the dinosaurs, where do you want to go? Off in the yacht on your Speedos with disgrace on your head? That's my vision of Philip Green that I still want you to keep. Or you're doing something where you are making a difference and you're still making money and having a lovely life. What is there not to love about that?
Wow. Why is, okay, so
exactly,
that's the first time.
Why? I'm doing that all the time. I'm like, what?
Oh, gosh. I was going to say, it's absolutely, I'm aware of both, but I've never had them laid side by side by that.
Well,
and that's quite
Anita
extraordinary.
Roddick, can you hear me on that? Anita Roddick in the Body Shop. Now, we're talking back in the 70s. Back in the 70s, she was talking about our planet and saying, creating one of the most successful 1,000 shops beauty business still going today.
Can you all hear that?
By the way, and when it got bought out by L'Oreal, no offense, L'Oreal, if you're listening, but they shoved her aside and said, well, she talks to plants, let's deal with the men. Bring in the money men. This is what happens, we think we've used the physics of business over the chemistry. We've used our head over our heart. And great business comes from an instinctive connection to the rhythms of life and creating businesses that feed those rhythms. That, to me, is where cleverness comes out, not how much bangs for your bucks that you can make. Those days are over. And the answer to all of this, in the old days, when you go back through the history, right back to the Greek agora, when you look back to commerce, the Greek agora is where everybody would meet to vote and connect. We're humans. We're neurobiologically wired to connect, not to sit online all day, for God's sake. We want this. It's a part of who we are. We are of the earth. We are connected to the earth, But when you go back, you'd have people getting together, and you'd have, which was the philosopher who used to walk around the Greek agora who never wrote anything down? The oldest one.
Somebody?
Who? Yeah, no. Socrates. There we go. So you failed. I thought you lot would know that. That was a bit rubbish, wasn't it? Anyway, he'd go round, he'd be chatting. You imagine, dropping stuff off, and then someone wily would come along with a table, think, there's a crowd, I'm going to sell stuff. It's been there forever, and then you go through the years of, Marks and Spencer's, it's location. This is always looking, the great innovative businesses are looking and looking and looking for the next way. Well, this is the new landscape. And you will see extraordinary innovation coming through on this. And that's what we need to get behind. What Triodos is doing, it's innovation at its heart. And for too long, it's been seen as pulling business down, doing stuff that's right for the planet. It's not. It is the future. And so every time I talk, and wherever I'm talking, whether I'm in Zurich or to big businesses, I was at Unilever, who are actually thinking of signing up to the Better Business Act,
They are waking up to this. You know, they are waking up to it, but we don't get shown enough of it on the news at all. But here's the other part of this. When I go right back to the great philosophers, and what happened really to society? And there's a great Amazonian tribe who talks about, you know, the bird of humanity. What's happened over millennia, but particularly the last 500 years, is we've built organizations and systems around a patriarchy. You know, the church, that is crumbling. You know, religion is dying. Spirituality isn't. Politics. I mean, I was in the House of Parliament yesterday. I was looking at paintings just from the 1980s, and it was literally Spot the Woman. It was insane. Really, really. This is just crazy, right? Business. So effectively, we've built systems that were just not good for humanity. They made huge amounts of money, but they suppressed the divine feminine. And the great, great philosophers have talked about this, but this Amazonian tribe talks about the bird of humanity. And it's a shame I've got this bloody microphone because I won't be able to use my hands as much, but here we go. So the male wing has been, the patriarchy wing has been flying for so long, and the feminine has been so suppressed. So the mystics that were moved aside and the religions taken over by men and pushing them aside as witches. Oh, it goes back so long. I haven't got long enough to go through it all completely. So the male wing's been flying and flying on its own. And over the years, it's become more muscular and it's become angrier. And what it's doing is just keeps flying around in circles and making the same old journey. And what they predict is that this is going to rise, that the divine feminine, the other wing, is going to rise. And it will meet the bird of humanity. And when they come together, we will not only fly, we will soar. That's our future.
Thank you. To end on a story, thank you so much. Oh my goodness. Yes, I just said to end on a beautiful story. I want to kind of bottle up this moment and when I leave tonight, like still have this energy. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Please join me again in thanking Mary Portas. Well done. Thank you so much. Ooh. This has obviously been a bit of an issue as well the whole afternoon. I think there's so many take-homes. Possibly the one right now that I'm holding on to is that we do need to go out looking for these stories. And not just stories, but evidence that things are changing. Listening to Mary, listening to everyone else that we've heard today, I feel convinced that that is true. Is it enough? Is it, you know, are we at a tipping point? Who knows? But we do have to go out looking for these stories, do have to go out looking for evidence and be part of it ourselves. And I know just by being here that you are. So we have, I apologize, gone over, but I felt it was worth it. I hope you agree. And I just wanted to thank all the customers, everyone on the panel that have been here. Thank Hans, thank Mary, and of course, thank all of you for your questions. We are running out of time. So all I have left to do now is to invite Bevis onto the stage. Oh, hello. Okay. We
That's
have...
right, Triodos Bank. I have immersed you in a world. This has been an acting class the whole time.
I'm sorry, it really...
I have been acting. I am, as I said before, an actor. This is an acting class. Round of applause to me for leading such a brilliant class.
I hate to inform you, but it's still the Triodos annual meeting.
Why am I here?
Ladies and gentlemen, please thank as well comedian Pravanya Pillai. I'm Bevis, over to you.
Thank you, Gillian. Can we have a round of applause for our wonderful host? It's a real privilege for the Triodos team to work with her, and such a professional, so she did a great job. And special thanks to Pravanya Pillay for her little interventions and reminding of us our humanity and the importance of laughter. The gentleman who made a cameo appearance popping through the jungle to fix Mary's mic is a gentleman called Paul King, and backstage are his team at King Sound, and they've done a fantastic job, and it's been a great event online as well, so thank you to them. And then I have a special thank you, because I have such an easy job. All I have to do here today is really turn up and talk and sound reasonably sensible. There is an amazing Triodos team that do absolutely everything else. They do a fantastic job every year, and they're led by Zoe Sear, our Director of Marketing Communications, who was on stage earlier. But this is her last deed before she goes on 2 months sabbatical to get married. So could you all thank them all and wish Zoe well? And thank you all for coming. Thank you for watching online. Thank you for all the support you give Triodos Bank. It gives us great energy today that you support us in the way that you do. So safe travels home, and hopefully see you again next year.